IB Nation, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. My mic usually mutes itself and decided not to today. Welcome to the Keys to Victory for Notre Dame's game against Louisville on Saturday nights. Of course, Notre Dame is traveling to Louisville, Kentucky to take on the number 25 ranked Louisville Cardinal. They are now 5-0 on the season. Notre Dame obviously sitting at 5-1 with the week 0 matchup that they had against Navy. So one extra game on Louisville. And this one, folks, is right in the middle of what we knew would be, but has been a daunting 4-game stretch. Obviously, you go Ohio State, Duke, now you have Louisville, and then you're going to go into USC next week. So this was a very important stretch for Notre Dame football. This battle against Louisville, obviously it being a road game, but has just some unique challenges to it. We'll talk about, obviously, what Louisville brings to the table, and we talked about that a little bit on Tuesday as well. If you all missed that show, you should go back and listen. But we really want to hit on before we start here because we're going to hit on keys to victory on both sides of the football, offensively and defensively. Of course, we'll pick the game, who's going to win, our final score predictions, maybe some prediction of game balls and big storylines out of that game. We'll also talk about just a great week in college football that it is, some really intriguing matchups that we'll hit on. So, Brian, this one, though, is a really intriguing matchup because I think that most people before the season would have said, Louisville's a scrappy little team, a team that you don't really know what to 100% perspective. You don't know what to expect completely because obviously Jeff Brom, first year overseeing the program, you knew Louisville always had talent, right? They always had athletes. They've always had that, but they've also brought in a lot of transfers this offseason. This is a big opportunity for Notre Dame, obviously, to get back on track, especially offensively, but some unique challenges that Louisville presents. And a lot that is at stake for Notre Dame coming into this week.
You know, obviously, Ryan, we thought Jeff Brom would do a good job at Louisville. He's going to get more talent than he had at Purdue, and he did a good job at Purdue, and so, he's going to have high-octane pass offenses. They're going to throw the ball a lot, throw for a lot of yards. But they're better than I thought they were going to be. And obviously, in really the last couple of years, they've had a lot of transfers. You mentioned some of the transfers that they've had, but some of them came in last year. The running back, the kid from Syracuse, Jordan, he's a transfer and came from last year. Then this year they added a bunch of guys when Jeff Brom came in. And this is an offense that's always going to be very attractive. And Jeff Brom's one of those coaches that if he could find the right school was going to have a lot of success in the portal on offense. But they've also had some success on defense in the portal, Ryan, getting some guys. And their secondary especially has benefited greatly from the transfer portal from a starting standpoint and a depth standpoint. And they're playing quality football. Are they world beaters? Are we going to sit here and tell you, like, guys, oh, man, Notre Dame's going to be lucky to go on the road and pull this one out? No, we're not doing that. We always try to be honest with you guys. But is this one of those games where if you bring your kind of C- game like you did against Duke, you could find yourselves getting beat? Yeah, because what Duke didn't have that helps Notre Dame is Duke didn't have those dynamic playmakers that when Notre Dame's offense was struggling could maybe rip off some big plays and put points on the board. Louisville does. And so you're going to need a much better all-around game against Louisville than you had against Duke. I'm not necessarily saying Louisville's better than Duke, just from a matchup standpoint. I think in on the perimeter, both sides of the ball, they present some tougher matchups in some places than Duke did. But at the end of the day, it's a legitimate top 25 team on the road. It's another opportunity for Notre Dame to grow as a team and show who they are as a team. And I kind of like the fact there's a lot of people picking against Notre Dame this week. I actually think that's a good thing. Because I think this team, Ryan, was kind of feeling itself a little bit, going into the Ohio State game, rightfully so. And they just played last week a little bit like their confidence was shook a tad. You know what I mean? Especially on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe with everybody kind of now jumping off the bandwagon nationally, which is what they do, right? When Notre Dame's good, they're going to hype you up, get all the clicks they can out of it. And then when you lose or you struggle, boom, let's crush them. Yeah, all good. Maybe that gives them a little bit of a chip on their shoulders that they need to kind of go out and like, okay, y'all want to hate on us, y'all want to doubt us. Okay, cool. Let's go show everybody what we got. And that's the chance that's in front of Notre Dame this weekend. And if they win, it's gonna be an earned one because this is a quality Louisville football team.
Now, and obviously, potentially getting to 6-1 would be big time for Notre Dame going into their game against USC. And obviously, we can't look too far forward, but we know that this is the toughest stretch on the schedule for Notre Dame. And finally getting to the end of that stretch would be big time for Notre Dame, because then you get a bye week, obviously, after USC as well. So you can kind of breathe for a couple seconds, which would be great. But I just, this one is massive for me, because this one, there could be I felt like if Louisville was just a solid football team going into this game, maybe they were 3-2 or even 4-1, but like it just wasn't a really sexy 4-1, that Notre Dame maybe would look past this team, right? To be like, we play USC next week. Like, we'll just take care of business. I don't want to say sleepwalk, because that's not the team's perspective on that, but like, we'll get that done. Then we'll go to USC and get a big W. Now with Louisville being undefeated and you are in hostile territory, I expect it to be kind of raucous there as well. Like, I expected it to be some pretty good energy there. Them at 5-0, them a top 25 team in the country. I think Notre Dame will be ready to play. I do. I think they understand how important this game is for just kind of the resume of this season right now. So it's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be.
And if they aren't, Ryan, it's a big red flag. Like, especially if you're not up for this game, it's a big red flag. Look, I know you're tired. Just is going to be your 7th game in a row. I get all that, but that's when the great teams kind of really dig deep and say, hey, it's not the ideal schedule. I've always said this would be the perfect time to have a bye heading into, like, play this game, then a bye next week. Like, that's the only change. That's the only issue I had with the schedules. I would have liked to seen USC moved back a week if it was possible. And obviously it doesn't seem like it was possible with USC schedule, but that would have been the ideal. But hey, look, this is the hand that's dealt to you. So go out there and get it done. Go out there and battle, go out there and play hard and go out there and do what you need to do to get this W. Because that's kind of where Notre Dame is at right now, Ryan. It's just keep winning. Right, you've got enough. You're sitting there at number 10. You're not that far off. There's a lot of games between teams that are ranked ahead of you against each other coming up. There's a lot of those teams have to play other really good opponents coming up. So you're going to get your chance to move up the rankings. You've just got to keep battling, and that's going to be the key for Notre Dame. And look, people can complain about the schedule and all those type of things, but this is still a relatively new phenomenon, and teams used to have to do this all the time. Hey, we always like to talk about, the last time Notre Dame won a national championship was 1988, but the last time Notre Dame won a national championship, they didn't have a bye. Sure. They played on September 10th to start the season, the 17th, the 24th, October 1st, October 8th, October 15th, October 22nd, October 29th, November 5th. Then they had a bye before their last 2 games, right? So the great teams dig deep and say, we got to push through. But the other thing, too, is if this team wears down, that's on the coaches, because this team is deep enough at the positions where you could wear down to play more guys. And so that's something that should factor into this thing as well. So it's a big game, Ryan, and a game that Notre Dame can and should win, but they're going to have to earn it. That's just, if they blow Louisville out like some people are predicting, it means they're going to have to play really well. They're capable of it, sure. I'm just not ready to predict it, because the only kind of emotional change that I've had over the last year is I've just kind of gotten into a little bit more of a prove it to me mode with some of my predictions, as opposed to, hey, this is what I think this team is going to do or should do, but more of I need to see it first. And with this offense, I need to see that, which we'll get into a little bit.
Well, let's start with the offensive side of the football, because obviously I feel like the reservation to predict a blowout potentially is because of what we've seen offensively the last 2 weeks.
100%.
They did not have a great showing against Ohio State. He had an even less great showing against Duke. It was a poor showing against Duke. So Notre Dame, who started the year off with 4 straight games of over 40 points, which was a feat that we have not seen in some time, has now had back-to-back games where they looked anemic offensively. 14 and 21 points in the last 2 games. So that 21 came in the very last minute of that football game. We know watching that Duke game was not pretty. It was 14-13 and had a chance to flip the script on them. So,
and Ryan, your first touchdown was set up by a fake punt when your drive stalled out. Your first field goal was set up by an interception that gave you the ball inside the 15-yard line.
Yep.
Right. So it reminded me a lot of kind of like the Clemson game last year, where, your offense didn't do a whole lot. The points looked a little bit better than they actually were, because the only difference is they didn't get you actual direct points. You didn't directly get a special teams touchdown and an offensive touchdown or defensive touchdown. But like you said, they played a team that they could get away with that because Duke was not a high octane offense.
No.
And they didn't have the play. They had good players, but they weren't those rip off 60-yard gain type of guys like Louisville is. And so you're going to need the offense to get back on track, Ryan. And then when I think of the keys to the victory this week, it's for me, and I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it's not just about this game. Like the keys we have are about this is what you got to do to beat Louisville, but
Right.
there are also things that we need to see Notre Dame do because they're going to need to be better moving forward. They're not going to be able to go win against USC and Clemson scoring 21 points the way that they did. You can't keep asking your defense to bail you out week after week after week. Eventually, the offense has to pick it up if this team's going to reach its potential.
And eventually the defense is going to have an off game, right? Like that's going to happen. A defense is not going to be as stellar as it's been for 12 games this year. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be a game where you're just like, the defense just doesn't have it today. Like they're just not playing great football. So the offense needs to be able to pick them up the way the defense has picked them up so many times already this year, especially the last 2 games, especially. So I agree. And I think that for me, we need to talk about starting fast, which is a key that we hit on a lot, but I think it really, it extends beyond just the scoreboard here, right? As far as like, let's get a couple early touchdowns. There's being good early on first down. There's being ahead of the sticks. There's a lot of different layers, I think, to this, Brian, than just simply, score your first 3 possessions. It's about sustainability, to your points, going against USC, going against Clemson, going against some of the better teams that are left on the schedule. I think starting fast is a huge key for Notre Dame in this victory that can extend to the rest of the season potentially.
Yeah, and we'll talk specifically what they need to do. But to your point, Ryan, it is very much and why is it important for USC and those type of teams? It's not even so much about you've got to score X a number of first quarter points, which is true. You've got to match early scores against a high octane offense, which is true. Those are all more practical things. But also on top of that, Ryan, it's a confidence thing. And that's even more of where I think the fast start needs to be this game. There are practical reasons why. There are practical ways to get there. You've got to be, good on early downs. How do you start fast? Be good on first down. How do you start fast from a point standpoint? Move the chains, right? Means you also got to be good on third down. Create some big plays, which we'll get into, and all those type of things. Those are all practical ways to start fast. Starting fast helps you practically because it allows you to A, quiet the crowd, B, jump up on a team if your defense is doing a job, C, match the other team's offense if your defense doesn't maybe come out red hot like it has most of the year. I mean, all those things factor in and are reasons why, but really this team needs confidence. They need confidence in themselves. They need confidence in each other. There needs to be more confidence in just all around. Sam Hartman needs to start having more confidence in his receivers. And you say, well, I understand why he doesn't. I do too. But as I wrote about today, and I talked about yesterday, Ryan, you're a 6-year senior. You're a captain. It's also your job to say, hey, I can either crush Tobias for not making plays, or I can say, hey, I'm the leader. I'm a 6-year guy. He's a sophomore. I need to build him up. So how can we do that, right? And so it's all of that encompassed into playing like a more confident unit. The defense is playing very confident football right now, Ryan, which is partly at times why they make plays in situations where you're like, that actually almost was a not a good play, but why did they make the play? Because that dude is just playing at a very high level right now. That unit is playing at a very high level right now, and we haven't seen that on the offense the last 2 weeks. And it's from the coaching on down. Because play calling, to me, reflects the lack of confidence that they have in each other as players, right? There's not a lot of confidence in the outside receivers from a coaching standpoint. And again, that's not a criticism of the coaching staff only, because I understand it to a degree, but at the same time, it's like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to get those guys going? Are you just going to say, well, let's just keep avoiding it until it bites us in the butt? Or are you going to say, we got to fix this? Schematically, we've got to fix this from an attitude standpoint. Maybe it's a personnel standpoint, whatever the case may be, they got to fix it. And if they can get this thing rolling early, especially if maybe some of the early plays go to some of those guys you really need to get going, whether it's Tobias Murray, whether Chris Tyree, Holden Stace, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, like some of those guys. And here's another guy that I think needs to get some confidence built up early, Ryan, which may surprise some people, is Jaden Thomas. because Jaden Thomas struggled in his 2 games against Power 5 teams so far. He had 0 catches on 4 targets against NC State, 1 catch on 3 targets against Ohio State. He's really struggled against the better teams on his schedule. You can't have that at the boundary position. So you can either say, well, bench him, or you can say, hey, but we need Jaden Thomas. So how can we get him going? How can we get him rolling? And so that's going to be part of the job of the coaches this week. It's going to be part of Sam Hartman's job this week, and to get this offense going. Because when you're struggling, Ryan, you know this, and you come out the next game and you start off the exact same way, it can build. And we started to see that against Duke, where once they started struggling, it just kind of seemed like it just started piling up, and it was the first time all year we saw bad body language from the Notre Dame players on offense. We didn't see that against Ohio State. Yeah, they were getting stopped, but they just still had confidence. And so when they fell behind 10-0, it's like, we're good. We got this. Boom, 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 touchdown. Boom, 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 touchdown. But since that game, and it really looked that way kind of on that last drive, the last couple plays, like from a play calling standpoint. But in this game, once Duke started making stops, the body language looked really bad on the offensive side of the ball to me. And that's when you're like, this is not a confident group, and that has to get fixed. All the scheme in the world doesn't fix that. It comes down to, now the scheme can help you get that, but at some point in time, the players got to step up and say, we got this.
Well, the Duke game was so weird to me too, because there's actually been a couple games this year that I feel like the offense has started a little bit slow, but then adjustments kind of get them out of that, right? You come out of halftime and you just feel a little bit more just understanding of what the expectation is and a little bit more pace offensively. Duke was a weird game because I felt like you went to the locker room and you were like, okay, we're up 13-0, but like, we know we're not playing well, right? And then coming out of the period, you're just like, there was no answers, right? Like there was no juice. There was no answers. There was nothing there tangible to hold on to and be like, we're going to be all right. Like it got really murky there for a long time. So I think that fast start is especially important because we've seen this team not start well in some games this year offensively, but we usually have seen them adjust and find their stride, especially after halftime. And we didn't see that last week. So you need to stop that from being a trend, obviously, right? Like you can't have that happen again, because if you fall behind against USC next week or even Clemson in a few weeks,
or even Louisville this week, I mean, with their big play offense.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say that the big thing for me about starting fast is that this Louisville team is a team that I think will kind of feast for being up early, right? Because
the crowd especially.
I wasn't even talking about the crowd, but yeah, that's a great point, is that the crowd is going to get into it. But Louisville is built to score points. That's why you brought Jeff Brom in. That's why you wanted his offensive mind aboard. But also that defense, just kind of on the other side of the coin here for a second, they are a undersized but athletic defense that wants to be in attack mode all the time. When's the best way to be in attack mode? When a team's behind and they're on their heels a little bit and they're trying to find answers. If I really feel like offensively, if Notre Dame finds a rhythm early and they get off to a fast start and they punch this Louisville team in the mouth a little bit, obviously not figuratively, they have a chance to, I think, really assert their will on this team early, because I don't think this team wants to play that trench warfare. I don't think they want to play, 10 rounds with a team like Notre Dame if they are working downhill, if they are being aggressive, if they are dictating the pace and the feeling of this football game. I don't think Louisville wants to play that type of game. So I think getting off to a fast start is especially important, because this is a fast Louisville defense that it wants to prey on bad decisions, on mistakes, on negatives. Like they want to create those things. And I think that Notre Dame needs to be able to really just come out early on and be like, it's not your day, guys. It's just not your day. It's our day. It's not your day.
Put that doubt in their mind, Ryan. Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Put that doubt in their mind, like, because right now Notre Dame's a wounded animal. And one of two things happens with a wounded animal. One is you put it out of its misery, and that's what Louisville's going to try to do. Or two, it's like, okay, it realizes it needs to fight for its life, and it's fighting. It's got more than I got. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's where Notre Dame offense is right now. And also a fast start's going to tell us a lot about who this team is on offense from an attitude standpoint, right? I mean, do you have some dogs on your offense that are saying, hey, man, I got this? Because that's part of it too, right? We can talk about scheme and play calling and all that, but at some point in time, when you're struggling, there's got to be individual players that say, hey, Sam, come to me on this play. I got this, right? Who are those guys right now? Is it only Mitchell Evans at this point in time? Who else is going to step up beside him? It can't be Audric Estime. It can't be a running back, in my opinion, because at the end of the day, you're kind of beholden to what's happening in front of you. But it can be, Rocco Spindler and Blake Fisher turning around to, Joe Rudolph on the sideline saying, hey, next time we get in a 3rd and 1 or next time we need to do this, you come behind us and then go get it done. You know what I mean? Who is going to be that guy, right? Or guys. And those are the things that I want to see. And if that happens this week, and sometimes it happens during the week of practice, Ryan, in preparation, like, hey, I got this. And then I'm going to go out and have that week of, that I need to do. And then you got to go make plays in the game. But we can, and the scheme's got to be good. I'm not excusing the staff. They've got to come up with a good game plan, make sure they're doing things to get those guys to football. They've got to make sure they're calling plays, say, we got to get this guy going, doing the right personnel, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, this is one of those things where a great team is going to have days like this. We've talked LSU 2019, great, one of the best offenses I've ever seen, probably the best offense I've ever seen in the regular season. That and probably 08 Oklahoma, as far as just great regular season offenses. And maybe 2013 Florida State, right? All those teams had games where it's just like they didn't have it that day. That's going to happen, but you can't allow it to then manifest and keep bringing you down. Notre Dame had a rough week last week. You know what I mean? They had a couple rough plays against Ohio State that kept the points down. Last week was just a rough game. How do you bounce back? And the great teams bounce back. Like we broke down early in the week, Ryan. Hey, you know what? Georgia had some ugly wins recently. But as we said, what did Georgia do after that ugly win at Missouri? They steamrolled people, right? What did 2009 Alabama do after they had that, really close loss to Tennessee that year? Right? They went and smacked the number 9 team in the country the next week and then started steamrolling their next few opponents, right? And that wasn't even like a great Bama team, to be honest with you. It was probably the worst. That in 2017 were probably Saban's, quote unquote worst, for lack of a better term, teams that he had, that won championships, as far as talent and just dominance, all those kind of things. But that's kind of what you want to see is what do you do? What do you do when your back is against the wall? You want another example, Ryan? 2012 Alabama. They lost at home to Texas A&M. You know what they did the next 2 weeks? They outscored their opponents 98-0. Right? Like, what do you do when your backs are against the wall? Yeah. Yep. And then we're going to find out what this Notre Dame team does when their backs are against the wall. And this is an offensive thing because there are always things, Ryan, you and I are football guys. We're going to dive into things. We're going to always find things. Hey, this has got to get better. And everybody's got to get better at this point in time. But it's hard, big picture, to have a whole lot to say about the defense right now. I mean, seriously, your biggest complaint is, gee, I can't believe you gave up that fourth quarter touchdown to NC State with your backups, allowed them to get over 20 points. You know what I mean? Like, doing a pretty good job. But at some point, you've got to kind of protect them. And this is my big fear with Coach Freeman as a defensive coach, to be honest with you, Ryan, is sometimes defensive coaches think you can win that way week after week after week. You can't. And you've got to figure out ways to get your offense going because you still got to score points in college football. To be a championship team, you still got to score points. And you didn't bring Sam Hartman in here to have a nice 9-3, 10-2 build for next season type of team. You didn't. Otherwise, you should have kept Tyler Buckner if that's what you wanted to do, right? And let the younger guys compete with them. You did it because you think you got a chance to win a championship, and the championship team has to be able to score points. And we're going to see if they can find the right buttons to push this week. And it's going to include a fast start, because the way this team is playing, right, if they come out slow, they haven't proven to me that they can get out of that funk yet. They really haven't. And we're going to have to see that. Yep. Number 2. Let's go to number 2.
Number 2, of course, is what Notre Dame's offensive identity is always going to be built upon. That's the ability to run the football. And we saw last week Notre Dame did not run the football incredibly well until later in that football game, obviously getting especially that 30-yard touchdown to kind of bolster the stats a little bit. Notre Dame is always going to be a team that is built off of great offensive line play and the ability to assert your will on an opposing defense. And that starts obviously in the trenches and the ability to run the football. For me, Brian, like there's 2 big things that I really want to hit on mostly with this. And then obviously we'll go a little bit deeper. But one, that's Notre Dame's bread and butter, the ability to run the football. When they've been at their best, that has been what has driven the bus, their ability to be balanced, of course. But at the end of the day, Audric Estime, the other running backs in the room, that offensive line, you will go as that offensive line goes, in my opinion. So that run game, I think, will be a great example of just how good you are offensively on Saturday. And number two, I already hit on this one a little bit. Louisville's an undersized team. They are an undersized team. And you can't just go duo, run just straight at them all game. You need to find a way, though, during the duration of this football game to assert that downhill running attack, especially for me, because they have a defensive line that is inside 290, 270 something, former walk-on. You have two linebackers that are listed at 6'1", 230 pounds. I like the Alderman kid, but there is no way that kid is actually 230 pounds. Absolutely no. He's much more Jalen Sneed than he is JD Bertrand, for instance, as far as his build. Like, he's just not that kid. This is an undersized athletic defense that if Notre Dame does enough offensively from a run game diversity perspective and from an eye discipline perspective, I think that you can really wear this defense down in the run game. But that is, of course, is on paper. That is me theorizing that this should be a reality that we live in. At the end of the day, on Saturday night, Notre Dame needs to assert their will, and they need to get that run game going, because that should be a massive advantage for them in this football game, in my opinion.
Oh, you're spot on, Ryan. And it comes down to, it's not even just the matchup is huge, but it's like, if this is who you are going to be when your backs are against the wall, if you can't go to what you're best at, then maybe it's not your best, or maybe you're just not good enough, right? And now that doesn't mean they've got to come out and say, okay, this is what Ryan and I want to see. We want to see 23 personnel on the first 5 plays and run this. I mean, that's not what I'm saying.
Double tight power eye. Let's go, baby. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way.
But it's about in the flow of the game, establishing the ability to run the football. That may be coming out and throwing the first 3 plays of the game to back them off or something like that. I always say, look, you don't need to come out throwing. Come out and have RPOs built in. So if the other team is getting you with numbers, you can pull and throw and do some other things. I think RPOs are going to be a big part of protecting the run game this week and really getting the run game going. That if Louisville does what you and I know they're going to do, which is get numbers down, because they're going to like, dude, I dare you to beat us with the receivers you have right now and the way you're playing right now. I dare you.
Especially since they have pretty good corners. So they'll be very okay with that matchup.
Exactly. That's what Duke did last week. Duke said, I dare you to beat a stone to football. And Notre Dame couldn't. I mean, you say, oh yeah, they did at the end. Like, okay, you want to bank on another 4th and 16 conversion, this week? I don't. Right. And so that has to get going, and it's going to be, you're going to have a good game plan to do it. You're going to have to, be a little bit more creative than you were last week, mix up your personnel, get back to some of the things that worked for you, and get back to being downhill too. That's the other thing, Ryan, is I was really surprised with just how much of the slow developing stuff they were focusing on last week, when it's like, that's cool. That stuff's got to be part of what you do, but you got to be willing to just hit it quick, whether it's putting a different back in the game, whether it's using estimate to run your inside zones. I need to see some of that stuff. And then also be willing to do some things to protect your run game with your motions and reverses and jets and things like that. There's too much there for them this is my biggest frustration with the offense. There are too many things there that can be done that they're not doing for whatever reason. RPOs, using the right players on, like when Tobias Merriweather goes in motion. Is anybody worried that they're going to give Tobias Merriweather a jet sweep, a 6'4", 200-pound kid a jet sweep? No. Are you concerned at all? Central Michigan may not be able to stop Jaden Thomas on a jet sweep, but everybody else that's good on defense has done it whenever they've tried it, because that's just not the guy that scares you, right? You're not game planning because, they may give Jaden Thomas a jet sweep or Rico Flores. No. You're concerned about Chris Tyree doing it. You're concerned about doing it out of 20-something personnel and having Jeremiah Love be the guy that gets that kind of ball, right? Those are the things I want to see is maybe do that, Ryan. Come out in 21 personnel, put Jeremiah Love out in the slot, and do some motion stuff with him. Have him be your guy that you're smoking with reverses. Because
we saw it last week he got a jet, didn't he, or a jet pass?
Well,
whatever it was.
And it went, and we didn't see it again. But like, imagine that if like you're in a 21 personnel, you've got him out of the backfield, you're running your inside zone stuff, and he's running a reverse action, and the defense doesn't respond to it. What are you going to do? You come right back to it, right? Before they get back to the sideline and have a chance to adjust, you come right back to it. So there's all types of things like that they can do, and all those things serve to protect the run game to allow it to get going. And we for whatever reason, we just haven't seen a lot of that stuff. We've seen it in practice, but we haven't seen it in games, and that concerns me because it's not. We're past the time where fans are asking, like, were they holding on for this until X game? Well, the Ohio State game happened, right? They're not holding on things. Well, yeah, we could have maybe used it to beat Ohio State, but we're really waiting to use it against USC.
We're saving it for
Right?
Stanford, baby. Saving it for
Right.
Stanford. Yeah.
So if we get George in the playoff, we really want to save it for them. Like, this is kind of who you are. So you guys have got to figure some things out and say, hey, look, we've got to be willing to adapt. And the head football coach has to be willing to promote it, allow it, and say, hey, look, we've got to be more aggressive. And this is what there was somebody was questioning us on this. And here's my point. Instead, you're trying to figure it out. Notre Dame has been two different offenses this year. They've been that aggressive, go at teams offense the first 4 games, and then they've been this really super conservative, not wanting to push the ball down the field, not being as creative with your run game, not running as many RPOs offense the last 2 weeks. And I don't understand why, other than just the fact that you don't want to make a mistake. You just want to, grind it out, keep the score down. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I kind of get it against Ohio State. I don't like it, but I get it. But what's the reason for being so slow and methodical against Duke? Are you worried about Duke's offense? Right? I mean, I understand playing complementary football, but at some point in time, your defense has to be used to complement your offense as well, instead of your offense always having to sacrifice for the defense. And your defense is good enough at this point in time, Ryan, especially if you attack with it, where you can let your offense be more aggressive. And that, I guess, I should say, my bad, kind of already started leading into number 3. If you want to just kind of introduce that one, and then we can just continue to go full steam into this.
Yeah, we really want to talk for number 3. The big key offensively is to be more creative in the pass game. And I think that what was really frustrating about Duke, especially Brian, was I felt like the fact that you didn't have Jaden Thomas, you didn't have Jaden Greathouse, and Deion Colsey's out with the injury, obviously, as well now, that the offensive identity turned from let's just be as vanilla as possible and not utilize our players the best that we can from a passing game perspective. Like, it just seemed very scripted, boring. I mean, I don't even know what the word is 100%, but like, it certainly wasn't creative. You didn't push
low risk
the envelope of creativity. It was very vanilla. Risk. It was a very vanilla passing scheme. And I feel like we're just really selling shorts in that instance. The talent that you still have at wide receiver, right? Like, I know Tobias Merriweather had a bad game, but you still have Rico Flores. You still have the tight ends. You still have Chris Tyree. You still have some really potent passing game weapons potentially. But for whatever reason, though, Notre Dame just kind of leaned into conservative run game, and they completely forgot about pass game diversity that we talk about sometimes a lot as well on this show. And for whatever reason, that was not a reality against Duke. It needs to be a reality against Louisville, because Duke is going to do a lot of the same things that Louisville, is going to do a lot of the same things that Duke did to you. They are going to try to stop the run game, and they are going to force you to pass. And Notre Dame didn't have any answers against Duke because there just was no creativity in the passing game, and it was just easy to cover up. Louisville is going to do a lot of the same things, and I really think that this game is going to exemplify just how creative Jared Parker and this offensive staff can be from a passing game perspective, because there's going to be opportunities to make big plays, folks, in the passing game. There is in this game. I know that Louisville is going to sacrifice numbers to say, we're not letting you get the run game started. Can Notre Dame capitalize on that? That's the big question. But I think they'll have a chance to, because there's going to be a lot of one-on-one opportunities, I think, this week.
Yeah. 2 things, Ryan. Number 1 is you're correct. Louisville is going to sacrifice that, and they're going to make you beat us with the pass game, because we're not going to let your run game beat us. Why do I think they're going to do that? Because every other team that they've played this year has done that, right?
Right.
Number 2, they were a team that was susceptible to giving up the big plays in the pass game anyway in their base defense. And so now there's certainly those opportunities, Ryan. And the frustrating thing about last week, and what I want to see why this is a key this week, is because I thought in the first series on the script, they had some stuff. They did that motion and ran the wide seam. They did that kind of post snap switch. So if I remember, they were in 12 personnel. They had Holden Stace here, and they brought Mitchell Evans here. Then they said Holden Stace on a backside seam, brought Mitchell Evans up the seam. He comes wide open, big play. Then they took a shot on a post route to Tobias Merriweather. And yeah, it fell incomplete. But you know what? He was open. And they never went back to it. And so you ran the shovel. on the first series after you had the first down, right? That was creative.
Yeah.
So the script was there, but then it's like once they got off the script, it was like, okay, let's just get out of this game kind of thing. And that's not the mindset of a champion, in my opinion. It really isn't. It's like, hey, we're missing guys, so let's use some other guys to make some plays. And when we talk about creativity in the pass game, we're not talking about running double passes and trick plays. It's just about expand your universe a little bit, right? Be more willing to use the RPOs to protect your run game. Be more willing to use other players and you and I talked about this earlier in the week. Get Jeremiah Love maybe an early downfield seam target, and you're doing that because it may hit, right, and that'd be great. But if not, you can utilize that and say, hey, they're aware of this, they're running to this, they're worried about 12, so let's use this to kind of come back with it. And we've seen them do some stuff with him out of the backfield, but it's been like the same thing every time. It's been just that wheel concept. It's like, guys, I think they have this figured out. You ran it against Louisville or NC State. He was open for a big play. You didn't throw it. You keep going back to it, and now teams are covering it. So what is your counter off of that?
Right.
And it's kind of like, yeah, you ran some stuff now that worked earlier in the year, but hey, guys, teams get film. You've got to have some answers. And I want to see that in this game, Ryan. And so that's what we mean by creativity. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's not adding 40 new pass concepts to your offense. It's enhancing the things that you're doing, complementing the things that you're doing, and bring in some of the things that we know you can do and have done just on a smaller scale to be more aggressive. And then when those chances come, guys got to step up and make plays. That's the reality of it. So those are the things that I want to see, Ryan, because it's going to help you against USC and Clemson but it's going to help you beat Louisville, and you're going to need that to beat Louisville, because if you're just going to run those, you know what their pass game turned into last week? They turned into Duke. That's what they basically turned into until the last drive. It's just, let's just run some levels and some option routes. And it's like they would run these option routes against man and then just stop and not move. And it was just like, well, yeah, that's covered. No one's moving. No one's doing anything. It was just such a very, like you said, very vanilla, no aggressiveness. And Duke just sat on it, and they never did anything about it until the last drive. Now, fortunately, the last drive did happen. But I don't want to see that this game, Ryan. I want to see a team that says, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to go make plays. We're going to create opportunities. We're going to make some plays. And that's going to be a key for this offense.
Well, I think that this is a secondary and just a passing defense in general that I think they can get got by some good passing attacks. I really do. I mean, I like a couple of the players that they have in that secondary. I mean, even a couple of their backups. You're like, Storm Ducks played a lot of football in his career. Like, that's a really good backup player. Cameron Kelly, that's a really good backup player to the starters they have at corner. But ultimately, for me, I'm watching this pass defense. I'm like, they like to play a lot of man coverage, but also they have the ability to give up some big plays there. They do, man. Like, they are going to sacrifice numbers in order to put their defense in one-on-one position a lot in this. And I think that that's going to transcend into this football game, because why wouldn't you do that against Notre Dame? Like, I am worried about box against Notre Dame right now. I'm not worried about outside the numbers and deep down the field. Like, that's just something that personally for me as a defensive mind, like, I come into that football game, I'm just like, you have to show me you can make a play before I respect it. Like, I'm not going to respect the play that I haven't seen on film or that I haven't seen consistently on film. So they're going to have opportunities is my biggest thing here. Because I think that Louisville, although they have talent in the secondary, they are susceptible for giving up some big plays. They are susceptible from giving up some completions. Like, you can have, you have opportunities here, man. You do. And you have I always steer back to this, but like, it's so true. Sixth-year quarterback Sam Hartman, who is top 20 all-time in both passing yards and passing touchdowns, did not come to Notre Dame to be a facilitator and a distributor. He did not do that. He came to Notre Dame to create big plays and open up a passing attack that has not been opened up enough. Louisville has an opportunity for you to have some big plays and some big chunk plays and production in the passing game this week.
Ryan, the thing is too, is I think as fans we have to start thinking about is this a coordinator problem? Because like what I continue to grow tired of is when people make the same complaints about Jared Parker in the last couple of games that they made about Tommy Rees last year. At some point in time, we have to ask ourselves, is it the coordinators, or is this just the direction that the head football coach wants to go? And my hope is that Coach Freeman says, hey, look, we can't keep winning like this over the course of a season. We've got to turn these guys loose. And I just feel like when they've had some injuries or the first time they struggle a little bit or they're playing a good team, there's just sort of like a don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake mentality. And you are good enough to still beat Duke that way. You may not be good enough to beat Louisville that way. And you can't keep putting that on your defense. And so we're going to need to see that change a little bit. And to your point, Ryan,
Yep.
there's still way too many weapons on this team not to be using them better to where you can't score more than 21 points on Duke or 14 points on Ohio State. And that's what we need to see, right? And so turn your guys loose. Turn your coaches loose. Turn your players loose. Turn them loose, man. And if Sam Hartman happens to throw a pick, I'll take that if he means he throws for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'd much rather have that, 350 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick, than 225 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, and you got to hope that Louisville doesn't go down and score on that last drive when you're up 20-17. Like, just not going to win that way.
And my last note on this, Brian, before we get over to the defensive side of the ball, is if someone wanted to make an excuse last week about the wide receiver position and the injuries and been like, well, they were down something and that was the issue, that was the problem, you could make that argument to a degree, right? This week, you're expecting to be more healthy at the wide receiver position. That's not an excuse in back-to-back weeks anymore. That's not an excuse against a Louisville team that, all due respect to the Cardinals, who I think are a good football team, you are more talented than them. You're more talented than them. So with health not being as much of a circumstance as it was last week, throw the excuses out the door. Like I just want a Notre Dame game, whether it is positive or negative, to not have an excuse put on the back end for some reason, right? Like last week, it's no wide receivers healthy, yada, yada, yada. You're on the road, blah, 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 like all that stuff. And I get that. Those are factors in the football game. But at the end of the day, at the baseline, you are a better football team than the one you're playing on Saturday. You are, or at least a more talented team, I should say. You're more talented than them. No excuses this week offensively. Get it done, man. Just get it done. You have the opportunity. Get it done. Make some plays. That's what I want to see on Saturday.
Yep. That's going to do it for the offensive keys, Ryan. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And a lot of these keys are going to be about just sort of, this is the side of the ball where it's like, dude, keep doing what you're doing. A lot of this stuff is going to be keep doing what you're doing, especially what you did last week. Yes. If last week's game is sort of a building block for what this defense is going to be moving forward, I'm going to very much enjoy watching this defense play. Because it's been it was very good the first 5 games, but they're always sort of like, man, but if they play that one team that can do this, they're going to get in trouble. What they did last week against Duke, that's going to make them much harder to consistently score on, and it's going to eventually start leading to teams making more and more mistakes. And here's the thing, too, that I'll say about last week's defense. If the offense would have done its job, the defense really would have put that game away in the second half. And I don't know if Duke would have scored more than a touchdown, because they could have taken a few more chances. Like you could tell they kind of wanted to, but then after a while, it's like, okay, we've got to back off a little bit in the second half because we can't afford to let Duke make a play because our offense isn't doing what they need to do. So if the offense can start picking it up a little bit, and this defense can really pin its ears back and let that D-line attack, Ryan, and even get a little bit more creative with some of his coverages, boy, they're gonna, they're gonna. This defense is going to be good. Now, this is going to be a much harder offense to do that against, Ryan, which is why we came up with our 3 keys.
Yeah, and number one, and it definitely spurs off of what we saw last week, because going into the Duke game, I remember one of the big headlines, Brian, was, can Notre Dame get enough pressure when it matters most from a pass game perspective? Can they get to the quarterback? Can they affect the quarterback? Well, the first key of this one is getting after the quarterback, being disruptive, because last week, Notre Dame did that. You talk about the game Howard Cross had last week. Talk about the game that Riley Mills had last week. Javonte Jean-Baptiste also had a really nice game last week. There were some pressures from linebackers on the second level last week against Riley Leonard and Duke. It was really nice to see. And obviously it was a little bit of a different type of defense, at least from a front perspective last week. Notre Dame was a whole lot more aggressive and trying to get after Riley Leonard. And they did that. They affected him in that football game. They really did. They forced a fumble. The last play of the game for them was a forced fumble where you affected Riley Leonard. You heated him up all game. Mm-hmm. This one, The big difference between this game now, Louisville, and Duke last week is that Riley Leonard can make some magic happen at times, right? Because he's a really gifted athlete. Jack Plummer, although he had some decent success last year against Notre Dame with his legs early on in that football game, especially,
still
he is
hurts me.
not. He's not that kid that wants to deal with pressure. He's not. Notre Dame, in order to be the best version of themselves defensively, I think one, that needs to be sustainable. The ability to heat up quarterbacks, the ability to get into the backfield, be disruptive. And then also the key to beating Louisville for that reason is because if you heat up Jack Plummer, you can force him into mistakes. You can get him feeling a little frantic in the pocket. This is a big key for Notre Dame victory, not only for the Louisville game, but also for the long haul of being able to defend some of these good quarterbacks they have on the schedule.
Ryan, last year, Jack Plummer having success running was about Notre Dame, not Jack Plummer. I mean, we broke it down after the game. It was terrible discipline from a containment standpoint, D tackles overrunning quarterbacks. I mean, it was more of a Notre Dame issue. We haven't really seen that be an issue this year. And in some ways, you could even say maybe they overcorrected a tad in certain ways. But that hasn't been as big of an issue this week. And, yes, they only had 2 sacks last week. But to your point, when you look at what Notre Dame did affecting Riley Leonard, this is what last week was a perfect example of. It's not always about sacks. Yeah, they only sacked him twice, including at the end of the game when you knew he was going to throw, right? But the kid went 12 of 27 in the game last week, right? Like that is the disruption. He was I mean, there was a couple times when you're disruptive, Ryan, there's going to be times when the other guys are getting open on a couple plays. There's a couple plays last week where Duke had a couple guys open. When I mean open against a good team, which means by a couple steps. And he couldn't step into the throws and get him off, and it resulted in incomplete passes. And so those are the things when you look at and say, hey, look, this is why you've got to do that. And you're talking about a guy that in the 3 previous games, his lowest completion percentage was 67.6. I mean, he literally went 12 of 12 against Lafayette. It's not very good. 15 of 20 against Northwestern, which is, not a great team this year, but actually been kind of scrappy on defense a little bit this year, Ryan, for the most part. But, you were disruptive. That's the key. And so when we talk about our number one key being, be disruptive against the quarterback, it doesn't mean they need to have 5 sacks. If it results in that, fine. That's great. I'm not anti-sack. But what I also like on those type of plays, Ryan, is I want Jack Plummer thrown off of his back foot up the seam so a safety can step in front of it and get the football.
Because he has 6 interceptions already this season. He's been thrown
in
to
5 games.
Yep.
Right. And you saw Indiana do that to him a little bit. Indiana did some things I thought defensively, Ryan, that were pretty creative. If you go look at it, like they were pretty creative plays. They were disguising coverages. Is when I mean creative, I just mean it's not like they were reinventing the wheel coverage wise, but they did a pretty good job, I thought, that game of really disguising what they were doing coverage wise. That's what I thought. And Jack Plummer had a rough game. And he went 13 of 23 for 238 yards. And I believe, Ryan, that 85 of those yards came on one play to James Jamari Thrash early in the game, right?
Yep.
And so think about that. He had 238 yards. They jumped out early and then just couldn't score again because they couldn't figure out ways to consistently get the ball completed to the receivers in that game. And a lot of it had to do with the way that Indiana was playing their defense. NC State did that to them this past weekend. NC State made them very, they got some big plays in the game, but they also had a lot of mistakes, 2 picks. There were some mistakes there. And I just feel like if you can pressure him, he will make mistakes. Where Jack Plummer's not going to make mistakes if he can sit back, get comfortable, make his reads, and do those type of things. That's when they're going to hit some catch and runs. They're going to get after you a little bit. The key, and you know this too, Ryan, I don't care how creative you get disguising your coverages. If you don't get pressure on the quarterback, a veteran quarterback will figure that stuff out.
Eventually.
What I want to see, and this is where I disagree a little bit with Coach Freeman, and I talked about this yesterday, Ryan. I want to give you a chance to talk about this because to see if you see what I see. He says you can't really confuse Jack Plummer. I totally disagree with that. But when it happens because you've sped him up. You've sped up his reading process because you're mixing up your coverage, but also because you are being able to be a little bit disruptive. You're able to get him out of rhythm where he has to get rid of the ball quickly. I thought that's what Indiana did a pretty decent job with in that game. Was that, and they sped him up, and the result was he forced some balls down the middle of the field that he didn't see a guy. The one seam, I think it was to the right. He threw it to the right. Did not at all see that safety coming underneath, robbing it, and just leaped in front and made the case. Had no concept that guy was there because they did a great job of disguising their coverages, but they got him out of rhythm with their pressures. And even though they only had 2 sacks in that game, he was out of sync the whole game. That is what Notre Dame needs to do, because if you can do that, he will make mistakes and you can beat him.
If Coach Freeman is saying that if I show Jack Plummer a certain coverage, there's no coverage he hasn't seen, I agree with you. Yep. There's 100% no coverage in 6 years that he hasn't seen. He's seen cover 6, 2, too high, different types of variety of coverages and combo coverages. Like, he's seen all that, right? But Jack Plummer, and why does he have 6 interceptions this year? It's because he doesn't deal well with pressure. He doesn't deal well with pressure. And that's most quarterbacks. That's not really a Jack Plummer thing. Most guys aren't Caleb Williams, who just kind of like feast inside of chaos and outside of pressure. Jack Plummer does not want to get heated up. He doesn't want to break the pocket. He wants to sit back there. He wants to be comfortable, and he wants to find an open man, which nothing wrong with that, as long as you keep him protected. As long as that happens, you're good to go. Jack Plummer, I think, has seen enough football where he's not going to make a ton of mistakes just by seeing what's in front of him.
Right.
But you're 100% correct. And when you make that process quicker, that's when decisions get made, right?
Yep.
If I sit down and I have a math problem in front of me, if I have as much time as possible, I'm probably going to figure out the math problem, right? But if I say you only have a minute to figure that out, now I got to try to figure it out,
Bingo.
and that's where you make mistakes. That's where you don't carry something and you make a addition error or like something like that. I know it's a really bad.
Right.
It's a really bad.
No, it's a great example, Ryan, because if I can sit and think through a problem, I can okay, hold on a second. It's the same thing with, like, I was a history guy. It's the same thing if, like, you were to give me, hey, you need to answer this question. All right, well, let me think about this. Let me look at Google. Let me research it. And oh yeah, that's right. I got my memory refreshed and I can talk about what happened at this battle in 18 whatever. But if you're like, hey, what was the turning point of this? You have 10 seconds to answer, and if you don't answer it, I'm slamming you to the ground. Right? That's what it is, right? It's the sped up aspect. If you're disguising your coverages and Jack Plummer's comfortable in the pocket, the thing about disguised coverages is they're only disguised initially. Right.
And so eventually.
Right. So once everybody's kind of gotten into their zone, all right, I've had my 3.5 seconds. I know who's where, and I'm throwing the football comfortably. But when I've got to get that ball out in 2 seconds and you're still mid-rob, I'm throwing a pick or I'm throwing an incomplete pass. And that's what Notre Dame did early on that last drive to Kyle McCord on the plays that worked, that got them in the 3rd downs and the 4th downs and those type of things. It was going away from it and giving them time to do it. And just because I don't think people are understanding correctly what I'm saying, I'm not criticizing Marcus Freeman for saying that. What's he supposed to do? If we can get after this kid, he's going to throw 3 interceptions. This kid, no. I don't care what he said. What I'm saying is what I'm saying is what he's saying is not actually accurate of how the game is playing. That's what I'm referring to. It's not a criticism of Marcus Freeman. It's saying this is what he said, but in reality, and that's what makes me think that the defense. Well, the defense knows this. They did it to him last year. He got some yards, but he went like 16 of 37 last year. They did it to him 2 years ago where he had a lot of completions. So it was really two different scenarios, Ryan. 2 years ago or last year, Cal was more of a vertically based offense, right? They like to get J. Michael Sturdivant and then the other kid. What's the name of the other receiver? Jeremiah Hunter. They liked but those guys were more vertical, downfield type of guys.
Longer kids. Yep.
Yes. And they didn't have time to get the ball to them. So he was 16 of 37. Not a very good day for him. And he had, if not for a couple scrambles, they do nothing against Notre Dame last year, throwing the football, right? And there was like the one blown coverage that went for the touchdown with Cam Hart. And then in 2021, he actually completed a lot of passes. The Purdue offense completed a lot of passes, and this is more relevant to Notre Dame. They completed 36 passes 2 years ago against Notre Dame. They threw for 291 yards against Notre Dame 2 years ago, but they did it on 54 attempts. They only averaged 5.4 yards per attempt, which is why they only scored 14 points in that game. And so when you look at it that way, Ryan, it's one of those things where this offense is going to have a lot of quick stuff, a lot of short game, a lot of screens. And if you are forcing Jack Plummer to just constantly get the ball out quickly, they're not going to move the chains a lot. You're going to rally to the football. You're going to make your tackles. But then B, when he does get the ball down the field, you pick him off. And that's exactly what they did to Purdue 2 years ago when they played Purdue 2 years ago is, yes, they completed some balls, but when they tried to push the ball down the field, that's when they got in trouble because Notre Dame was able to because they had sped everything up so much that they just couldn't get the balls out. And that's kind of what we're referring to here is they will make mistakes. Louisville will get their yards on Saturday, in my opinion. They will. But it's if they get 2 big plays in the pass game, and let's say they get 2 45-yard gains, okay. So that's going to happen. But if that's all they're getting, then you're okay. But if they're 45, 45, 25, 20, 16, 19, 23, that's when you get gashed. And those are the plays that Notre Dame has to avoid. And you're going to complete the every now and then complete the big play down the field, or maybe you make that one mistake. But overall, it's about creating disruptions, creating negatives. And if you can get Jack Plummer into 3rd and longs, that's where you're going to have a lot of success, in my opinion, in this matchup.
I think the big key is that, and this is all due respect to Jack Plummer, because I know he's played a lot of football in his career, but I want Jack Plummer to be the one that has to beat me in this football game. That's the key number 1 for me. And I think you'll hear in our keys 2 and 3, I think that really kind of illustrates that, because number 2 for us is Notre Dame has to control and shut down the running game for Louisville, because one of the absolute best players for Louisville team, not just offense, is Jawar Jordan, who is, like you said, a former transfer, and he is averaging right now 7.7 yards per carry this year as a runner. And he actually had a really nice year last year as well for Louisville. And what is he, Brian? Because it's going to lead into our third point as well, is he's a big play waiting to happen. He's a young man that is a feast or famine runner, in my opinion. A young man that...
Ryan, hold on.
Yes.
Just do both now. Because I think it's going to allow you to be a little bit more. You can get into a little bit more if you just add those 2 together now, and then play them off each other. So just go ahead and do point 3 now, and then you can keep going. Because I think I don't want you holding back on certain things that how the run game impacts number 3. So just go ahead and do those 2 together.
So our number 2 was shutting down the run. Number 3 was limit big plays, and that can come from a scheme perspective, execution, and then of course winning, tackling in space. And where I was going with Jordan is that Jordan is one of 3 or really 2 football players, but there are more potential. But there's 2 big football players in this team that have showed this year that when you make a mistake, they can make you pay, and they can make you pay all the time. One is Jawar Jordan, the running back. The other is Jabari Thrash, the wide receiver, who's averaging well over 20 yards a catch at this point. But Jordan, for me, Brian, from what I've seen this year so far, he is a very feast or famine runner in the sense of he has an opportunity to create some big plays in the run game and even in the pass game as well. But when he's not creating big plays, it's a very underwhelming running game usually for Louisville. Like I think of them, their last game against NC State, Jordan was not able to create a big play, and Louisville really struggled to run the football. But other games this year, when he's able to break those big runs, that kind of loosens things up a little bit and allows a guy like Jack Plummer to be a little bit more comfortable because now his players are making plays in space. He doesn't have to worry about being a great processor. He can just become an easy distributor where get the ball to Jordan, get the ball to Thrash, and they're going to make big plays. But stopping the run game, I think, is a key number 2 for me and obviously for you as well, because Jawar Jordan is one of those kids that if you are not gap sound, if you're 2 guys in a gap or you miss a tackle in space or you're just not incredibly disciplined from a run fit perspective, the kid can make you pay. He can make you pay. And he is also one of those guys that I think can overcorrect and kind of pick up an offense at times. Because if an offense is struggling, you're just like, man, we're just not getting anything going. And then one play, 75-yard touchdown, everything gets loosened up, and now you're kind of off to the races. Jawar Jordan stopping him in the run game especially, I think is a big key for this Notre Dame defense this game.
You know what this reminds me of, Ryan? Do you remember 2017 going into that NC State game when NC State had Ryan Finley quarterback, not the most
Yeah.
physically but a really
Smart.
veteran,
Yeah.
smart guy.
Yeah.
And the thing that made that NC State offense go, and up to that point in time in the season, they were 6-1. They were scoring a lot of points. They'd scored in their 5 previous games. They'd scored 37 on Marshall, 49 on Furman. They beat Florida State 27-21. They scored 33 against Syracuse, 39 in a win over Louisville, 35 in a road win over Pitt. And a big part of their success was Nyheim Hines being a fast, big play guy, but not necessarily an every down bell cow, right? And, you look at some of the games he had coming in, he averaged 8 yards a carry in the game before Notre Dame against Pitt. He went 16 carries for 135 yards, 19 carries for 115 on Syracuse, 11 for 92 against Furman. But he was kind of a feast or famine guy. And against Florida State, he went 24 of 94, 3.9. Well, that was the least effective offensive performance that they had that game. And then when you look at their win over North Carolina later in the year, 196 yards on 22 carries, 8.9 per carry. Like he was a feast or famine guy in a lot of different ways. And he was also a guy, unlike him, the thing I like about what Louisville does, just for a second, if I can get off point for just a minute, is they do a good job of, okay, even if you can shut him down in the run game, we're going to still find ways to get him the football. Because he's a kid that's got a 70 plus yard touchdown this season as a runner. He's got actually 2 as a runner, but he also has one in the pass game. He had a 75-yard touchdown against Boston College in the pass game. Last week, they completely shut him down running the football. NC State did. And he only had 32 yards on 16 carries. But he had a 26-yard reception. So that's where those two things tie together, Ryan, why I wanted you to put them together, because stopping Jamar Jordan in the run game doesn't mean you've stopped him completely in the big plays, and it leads to what you're talking about, whereas if you make Louisville just methodically have to go up and down the field, play after play after play, they're not going to be successful. They need the big plays to win, and if they're balanced and they force you to start inserting your third-level options into the run game more and more and more, they makes him even more dangerous throwing the ball, because all of a sudden they catch you on that one play action pass on first down where the safety robs down and he's peeking in the backfield, and Jamari Thrash or Kevin Coleman or one of their other weapons runs by you, and that's how you get hurt. I mean, Chris Bell, Amari Huggins, Bruce, they all have big plays this year that they've been able to hit you with. Jawar Jordan out of the backfield. They've all been able to hit some big plays this season, Ryan, and they're all capable of hitting big plays. But if you can shut them down, and that's why all of our points kind of go together, because it all goes back to the theory, Ryan, of you've got to dominate the line of scrimmage. All these points begin at the very foundation, even the big plays, with dominate the line of scrimmage. That's going to mean you're going to be disruptive against Jack Plummer. It means you're going to be able to stop the run game. It means you're going to limit the big game, the big plays in the pass and run game. And it's going to force Louisville to be a little bit more methodical and efficient. And the thing about them this year, and this is where it'll eventually get there with Jeff Brom, but right now they're just not an overly efficient offense. They've been, to your point, there has been some feast or famine, and we saw that against Indiana, we saw that against NC State. Jamari Thrash goes for an 85-yard touchdown early. What did they do throwing the ball after that? Not a lot, right? They won because they had the better players. Right? That's what it came down to. Notre Dame's going to have to make this about who's better in the trenches. And it's not even just about winning in the trenches. It's about dominating in the trenches. And if you can dominate Duke's defense last week with your front four, there's no excuse for you, offensive line, excuse me. There's no excuse for you not to have a similar mentality. I mean, scheme-wise, you'll be a little bit different because you always adjust for the team that you're playing. But the mindset of we're going to turn those boys up front loose, that needs to still be the foundation of it. Because if you can do that against Louisville, you will create more mistakes, because you don't have the runner at quarterback that you had last week that you have to worry about, which means you can use your linebackers more and more and more to drop under coverage, to get up underneath those over routes, to get up underneath those crossing routes, to get up underneath the slant routes, to get up underneath the in cuts, all the different things that Louisville likes to do to attack the middle of the field. You can use your linebackers as weapons against that, Ryan, if your front is dominant. If not, you're not only going to trigger your linebackers a lot to get after the quarterback, but you got to do it against the run game. And that's when I get real nervous about Louisville's ability to create some of those big plays. So it all builds on top of each other, Ryan, and leads to limit the big plays, dominate the line of scrimmage, and you're going to have a shot to keep this team in check offensively. They really will.
Well, I think all these I think a lot. Louisville has a lot of players offensively that are after catch and after contact players, right? They're guys that they're not necessarily big winners before the catch and in the air. They're more of let's get the ball in their hands and let them make plays after the catch and after contact. Jawar Jordan is one of those kids that you miss a tackle, you're in the wrong gap. That's when he's going to house call it, right? That's when he's going to house call it. Bari Thrash, like I'm watching them just throw now screens to him and him creating big plays just off of now screens because he is that guy that is going to be able to create those little nuanced moves in space to make guys miss and then hit some chunk plays. So the two biggest things for me, just kind of building off of it, is one, you have to be in good position. You have to make sure defensively you are in the sound, solid position to make a play. Number two, and this has been an Achilles heel for Notre Dame so far, you have to finish plays. You have no missed tackles in space because this is a team like we'll see with USC next week, like Ohio State also is, even though Notre Dame didn't have as much of an issue in that game. If you miss a tackle against these types of teams, they will be able to create big plays. Do not miss a tackle against Jabari Thrash. Do not miss a tackle against Kevin Coleman. Do not miss a tackle against Jawar Jordan. If you keep what's there in front of them and finish plays, I'm going to be okay I'm going to be very okay with Louisville trying to be an 8+ play drive to score points. I don't think that that's going to be incredibly effective for them. Where they are dangerous is 3 plays, 80-yard touchdown because they had a 70-yarder. That's where they separate themselves as far as being an explosive offense. Can't let guys like Thrash Jordan beat you on the game. Make Jack Plummer, circling back to the first point, make Jack Plummer be the guy that has to beat you on Saturday, not just be a facilitator and a distributor.
Ryan, if this game comes down to Jack Plummer's got to sit in the pocket and for 60 minutes go through his progressions, make those throws, you got to feel good about your chances to have success.
Yep.
But if he has too much time in the pocket, then he's going to be successful. But that leads to your point. Then it's no longer about Jack Plummer. It's about he's able to get the time to get the ball out to those guys. If Jack Plummer has to put this offense on his shoulders, I with all due respect to the kid, I don't think he's that guy. I don't.
No.
And Notre Dame has done. Notre Dame did I was really impressed with the job Notre Dame did against Louisville against Purdue a couple years ago. That was one of I thought Marcus Freeman's better games that season, and he had several, but that was to me one of his better games because they did. I mean, at the time, if you remember, Ryan, David Bell was like, I mean, he was really putting up some big time numbers. You know, I mean, he was a really good football player, and Notre Dame did a great job of shutting him down. I mean, if you go back and look at it, the 2 weeks before he played Notre Dame, he had 8 catches for 134 yards against Oregon State, 6 for 121 against UConn. The game after he played Notre Dame, he had 6 for 120, and then at Iowa, who always has a good defense, 11 for 240, had 11 for 217 that year against Michigan State, 11 for 103 against Ohio State, 12 for 101 against Northwestern. He caught 7 balls against Notre Dame for 64 yards, and half of those came on one play. Right? Yeah. So, like, they know this scheme, and it's going to just come down to being disciplined, which includes tackling and dominating in the trenches. And if they do that, then I feel good about it. I do think this team is going to be good enough, and we'll talk about this in the predictions. I do think this Louisville team is going to be good enough to make a couple plays. I do. I think there'll be some. You just got to limit them, and if they can do that, and they have so far, you just hope this isn't the week you have your off game. You know, you hope this isn't the week, because this week and next week are the 2 weeks that I just don't want to see Notre Dame have an off game defensively, because they have the weapons. This I would say this, Ryan. This is Louisville is in my top 3 of Notre Dame opponents of best group of weapons with USC and Ohio State. Like, just take away the quarterback, just looking at the offensive skill weapons, right? And I know a lot of the attention next week will be on Caleb Williams, but maybe they don't have a star receiver yet, but they've got like 6 really good ones. And they're good at running back, and they're good at tight end, and And this next 2 weeks are going to be your toughest remaining test when it comes to, you just got some athletes you got to go against and handle. And if they can do it like they have so far this year, they're going to be successful. But this is why, Ryan, to finish it up, this is why it's so important that the Notre Dame offense play well. You can't keep putting all this on your defensive shoulders. You're going to have to step up and do your part and do it early. They've done that against the bad teams, but Notre Dame just has not been able to score against the better teams on the schedule. They just haven't been able to do it, especially early. So it's going to have to get changed this week, and that's where they're going to be.
Well, I think that's why it was so frustrating the last 2 weeks, because Notre Dame wasn't able to separate themselves in either of those football games because the offense wasn't playing well enough. So everyone just started hyper focusing on the couple bad drives the defense would have instead of the 9 good drives that they would have a football game, right? Where it's like people would come out of these last 2 games, Brian, and be like, Al Golden's not the guy. He's not the guy. It's just like, no, he kept you in that football game. He kept you
and he's
in there.
done that every game you've played so far.
But you always hyper focus on the 1 or 2 times it didn't work because the offense wasn't able to separate themselves.
Right.
Separate them, and then defensively, it's just like, oh wow, they gave up 1 touchdown late. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, you don't hyper focus on it that much anymore. So yeah.
We're going to do our game predictions next, Ryan, and this is going to be a lot of fun. And I want to see, a lot of you have already kind of done your predictions already, so we want to hear those, and you can keep putting those in the chat, Ryan. But we're going to make our game predictions, and so we'll do it like we always do it, Ryan. We'll start off first with you giving me your score, and then just kind of walking me through how you see the game going based on your predictions. So let's begin. Ryan, you have the floor. What's your prediction, score prediction for this game, and how do you see this game playing out?
I'm a little bit optimistic here, but it's okay. We'll be optimistic. 34-17 Irish. My reasoning for this is that I actually think Louisville is going to create a couple of big plays in this football game. I do. Whether it's Jabari Thrash, whether that is Gerard Jordan with a big play. I do believe that Louisville is going to create a couple big chunk plays. But I am banking on the simple fact that I keep watching this team, Louisville speaking, where I keep watching their defense and keep saying, I just find it hard to believe that Notre Dame's not going to be able to run the ball on them. I just find it really hard with their undersized front seven. And if Notre Dame has any semblance of balance and ability to create plays on the perimeter and out wides, I think that Notre Dame is going to have a chance to really soften up this defense and really just have a way in the run game. So I think that this is a more well-balanced attack we're going to see on Saturday. I think Notre Dame comes out 34-17 in a pretty dominant victory here against a good Louisville team, feeling good about yourselves going into the week against USC. Notre Dame's offense gets a little bit right in this one. Notre Dame's defense continues to do good things, although they give up a couple big plays in this one, in my opinion.
So, Ryan, if the game plays out the way you have it, and you have Notre Dame winning 34-17, and it sounds like it's a game that it's not it's a game where at the end of the day, everyone's going to know Notre Dame was clearly the better team. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
If that happens, who gets your offensive game balls for the Irish when we are breaking this down and we're doing our post-game show? Who will you have as getting the game balls for Notre Dame if it plays out this way?
So offensively, this is going to be a very coaching cliche thing, but it's going to go to the offensive line this week. I usually kind of cycle in as a skill position player, whether it's Hartman or it's Audric Estime. I think Estime is going to have a big game. I think the running back room is going to have a big game. But I think that more than anything, outside of a bounce back offensively, this is going to be a big bounce back for this offensive line from what we saw last week. Last week was a bad showing. The interior offensive line did not play well. Joe Walt even gave up a sack in the game against Duke. Blake Fisher did not have a good football game. The offensive line for Notre Dame was not good this past week. I think they have a turnaround this week against Louisville. They dominate. They're able to run the football. They give Sam Hartman time to throw. I think the offensive line for Notre Dame is in due for a big week offensively.
So if Notre Dame wins this game this way, Ryan, what are the biggest storylines coming out of the game for Notre Dame if things go the way that you have them going?
Well, I think one of the biggest storyline is that you're going to see a little bit of a resurgence as far as the efficiency on Notre Dame's offense, the ability to create plays consistently. I feel like early on in the season, Brian, I know they weren't playing against the best defenses in the world. Things just felt methodical. Things felt connected. Things felt like they were in a really good sequence, right? There was a good rhythm to it. And I think rhythm is going to be the biggest thing coming out of this football game. And you're going to feel like Notre Dame found their identity a little bit offensively. And a second part to that is now you are setting up an even bigger storyline of Notre Dame USC coming out of this week, because now you're going to be like, Notre Dame has enough offensive firepower that if they get into a shootout against USC, they're going to be able to play with them. So I really think it's an offensive identity week for Notre Dame and finding it.
We'll throw a couple little curveballs here at you, Ryan, and I know you can handle them
Yes.
because I know you've thought
Sure.
about this game. Number one, if Notre Dame, if the offense does everything we said in the keys to victory, what does this game look like?
Say that one more time. You lost me
If
for
the
a second.
offense, if the offense thrives in all of the areas we
Yes.
talked about as the keys to victory, right? So they come out, they start fast, they pound them in the trenches, and then the pass game is really creative and all. What does the game look like then? Because like this is our prediction is like, look, this is how we think it's going to play out. It may not go perfectly, that kind of thing. But if they really hit on those three keys, and I just do the defense as well. If they really hit on the keys to victory, they really perform well in those three areas on offense, 3 areas on defense. Then what do you think this game looks like? Because what I'm trying to get at, Ryan, is this is what we think could happen, but this is the potential for what Notre Dame could do if they're really clicking coming out of this game.
I mean, I think this game could be 40 something to 10 if that's the situation that you're in, right? Because I think Notre Dame offensively, like I'll come back to it, but I think that if things are clicking the way that it can potentially click offensively, I don't see how Louisville really slows you down, right? Because they're going to be a team that is going to really try to stop the run. But if Notre Dame is able to show creativity in the passing game and able to just kind of make the field more balanced, then I think the run game is going to get going against the Cardinal. I really do. And then defensively, if you have a high octane offense for Notre Dame, or I don't even say high octane, if you have a better offense, a much better offense than what you've had the last 2 weeks, then I think that Notre Dame defense could just play so much more comfortable and so much more free. So I think this game could be a 40 something to 10 potential, but that one is if everything goes well. I think the 34-17 is more of, I think that this team can win convincingly in this one, but there's always that margin for error that, if a couple things don't go well, because like I think that they will give up a couple big plays in this one defensively. I don't think it's going to be perfect, but I think Notre Dame is just that much better than this team if things are clicking right.
To your point, Ryan, in a game like that too, it's the defense. You really bury a team in the second half in those type of situations, and that when you're really clicking, and then that's going to force Louisville to make some mistakes, and that's how you really put a team away, a good team away. Here's my prediction, Ryan. I'm gonna give you my prediction. I'm going with Notre Dame 31, Louisville 21. I'm going a little bit, and I thought about even making it 31-24. I just. And I'm going off of more just kind of what I've seen more so than what should happen. I've always said I make predictions based off what I think should happen. I'm going against that a little bit this week, Ryan, and because what I think should happen should look a lot like what you've talked about. As a matter of fact, I actually think if we're talking about Notre Dame really playing their game, and I'm not talking about playing the perfect game, because when a good football team plays the perfect game, they destroy people, right? I mean, that's just what happens. And I think of the 2013 Florida State Clemson game. That was a good Clemson team. That was the best team Florida State played all year, and they annihilated them because they just played like the perfect game. I mean, I think it was like 51-14, something like that. Those things can happen, but for me, I just right now don't have a lot of confidence in the offense, to be honest with you, because the 31 that I have here is built on Notre Dame is going to force Louisville into some mistakes that are going to give them some short fields, and the offense is going to put it away that way. So to me, I need to see it. I need to see it. I think this is not a team that you want to keep giving a lot of chances to because your offense is sputtering early. Yep. Defense could play out of their minds and still give up 21-24 points if you just keep giving this Louisville offense more and more and more chances. And that's why the offense does have to come out, find some early rhythm, go on some decent drives, get points on the board, and really put Louisville behind the 8 ball. I mean, because if your defense can do that, then you can put this game away, Ryan, in impressive fashion. But for me, I think Notre Dame's going to kind of sputter a little bit out of the gate. And the offense is going to need a little bit of time to get going based on my score. And it's going to take them maybe a quarter and a half to find their rhythm. Once they do, however, I do think they kind of pound Louisville a little bit in the second half because, again, for as bad as Notre Dame played last week, Ryan, they were winning 10-0 at halftime. You know, against this team whose defense I don't think matches up as well against Notre Dame. And to your point, Ryan, about that, so what you talked about the size. The one thing that Duke had is Duke is one of only a couple teams on Notre Dame's schedule that physically could, on the defensive line, could physically whoop Notre Dame if Notre Dame didn't play well. And Louisville isn't. Now, Louisville can out-athlete Notre Dame. They can be disruptive against Notre Dame. They can do those things and actually beat the Notre Dame offensive line from a who won the battle, but it won't be a physical butt whooping like Duke gave them last week. And that was a bit of kryptonite to Notre Dame. I don't think Louisville can do that. I think this game is going to be one where it's really close game for a while. The crowd stays in it, and then Notre Dame pulls away late. That's how I see it playing out. That's where my 31-21 comes from. It's just in my hope, Ryan, in this scenario, in my a little bit pessimistic, I'm not pessimistic at all that they're going to win the game. I'm quite confident Notre Dame's going to win the game, but my pessimism of why it's going to be closer than honestly it should be is it comes down to that. It comes down to just not feeling they're going to really have it. But I do believe, even in my pessimism, that in the second half, the offensive line, the run game will do enough, and then the defense will be able to create some mistakes. They'll make a big play or two in the run game or pass game and be able to put Louisville away late. 31-21 is where I went. I really thought about going 31-24 and making it a touchdown game. But at the end of the day, I still think Notre Dame's the better team. And what this year's team has shown is, in order to beat them, you have to have a roster that is either their equal or better. And Louisville has taken a jump under Jeff Brom, but they're not there. They're not there yet at enough places. Their skill can give Notre Dame problems. But when I watch their lines, Ryan, that's really what the separator is for me, is they don't have Ohio State's defensive line, excuse me. They don't have Duke's defensive line. They don't have even NC State's defensive line, in my opinion, or the speed at linebacker that NC State had. So to me, it's good, but they're more NC State than they are Duke or Ohio State, in my opinion.
Sure.
And meaning they're going to make plays and do all those kind of things, but they're not as disruptive as NC State. And like NC State, I think Notre Dame can create some big plays. So why don't I have Notre Dame scoring in the 40s like they did against NC State? Because I don't think this unit has the confidence that the offense had going into the NC State game. That's a big reason for it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think for me, this is obviously a confidence builder. It's really what I want to see offensively for Notre Dame. But defensively, I mean, Brian, you make a great point. I think this is actually true of like even defensive back for Louisville for the most part. But Louisville has enough talent at the skill positions to compete with just about anybody in college football. The difference between them being completely competitive against some of the better teams in college football and winning those games is the offensive and defensive lines. Notre Dame needs to have big outings in those ones. They need to be able to make their plays and to stop enough plays from a skill position perspective. If they do, I mean, the offensive line and defensive line should win handily in those matchups in this game. I don't see Notre Dame losing those matchups. But that is a huge key, obviously, this game. I just really forgot, though. I forgot to give my my defensive game ball.
Oh, yeah.
Doing that.
That's my bad. No, that's my bad.
No.
My bad.
That was actually mine.
I'm pretty sure afterwards,
But I'm pretty sure you opened it up for me for doing both sides, and I just did one side. So, I'll take blame for that one.
I appreciate you taking one for the team, Ryan.
Of course. That's what I'm here for, man. I'm a team
just
player.
A reminder, your game ball was offensive line for offense, correct? Line. Just a reminder. Okay. What's defense?
Yep. Defense is going to be Cam Hart this game. And the reason for that is that this is a space game. And I think that Louisville is going to want to try to create some plays to the field in this one, in a more increased space. Cam Hart being the field corner, I think that he's been playing some really good football, but I think he has a chance to shut down what is one of the bigger, because Jabari Thrash will play a little bit all over the place, but he'll play a lot outside to the field. They're going to try to isolate him out there because he's a good route runner. He's fast. He's after the catch guy. I think Cam Hart has a chance to slow him down enough and maybe create a big play. But more importantly, I think his biggest impact in this game, outside of maybe forcing turnover, will be tackling in space. When they just get just a quick out, or they throw a screen out there, or they do a now screen, or whatever it might be, make those plays end early on. So I think Cam Hart's going to have a big one in this one.
So because of that, Ryan, because you interjected that into my prediction, I think it's appropriate that I go into one of my storylines that I was going to discuss to back up what you're saying. Because what I was going to say is if Notre Dame wins this game the way that I think they're going to win this game or could win this game, is there's still not enough recognition for how good the Notre Dame cornerback position is. There's a lot of recognition for how good Benjamin Morrison is. I saw somebody put something out today. They said, who are the 5 best cornerbacks in college football? And they had Benjamin Morrison number 1. And I wanted to respond, and I didn't because I'm just not doing that on Twitter anymore. It's like, yeah, Benjamin's been very good this year. He has not been their best corner, in my opinion, this year, especially from a production standpoint. It's been Cam Hart. And in order to keep Louisville's points down, to your point of 17 points or even fewer if they really dominate, it could be the coming out party for Cam Hart. Because to your point, they're going to challenge him because they have to challenge him. They can't run their offense without challenging the field cornerback. They can't. And if Notre Dame shuts Louisville down, the defense shuts them down, it will be partly because of a coming out party for Cam Hart. And that's what I believe to be true. So having him as the player of the game based on how you think the game is going to go makes total sense. Makes total sense. And I dig that one for sure. My game ball, Ryan, on offense is going to go to Sam Hartman. And partly because I think that the offense is going to sputter a little bit early, but I think him making some plays in the pass game is going to what gives them going. Because if the game plays out the way that I think it will, Ryan, or not think it will, but predicted it will in this prediction, it involved them having a strong second half. Yep. And sometimes, even if you don't play a great game, but you play a great second half, that can give you a lot of momentum going into that next week's game. Just like I've said in the past, like you can have a great first half, but if you kind of just call off the dogs and just kind of sputter out of the game, do you have the same level of momentum going into that next game? So I do think they're going to have some offensive momentum because I could see this being like a 10-7, 14-7 game at halftime, 14-10 game at halftime, and then they come out and they kind of get going in the second half. And that's going to be because Sam Hartman makes some plays. I think so. And I'll say this too. If the game goes the way that I asked you about the 3 keys and if they thrive there, then I definitely think Sam Hartman gets the game ball. Because if Notre Dame comes out and they control the line of scrimmage and they have a creative pass game, Sam Hartman's going to go off, in my opinion. I really think that he would in that situation. It's just the way that I see it playing out. I think it's going to be more of a second half type of thing. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the offense comes out clicking right away. That's the ideal scenario, is just come out and put this game away early. And that would be ideal, obviously. But that would be more wishful thinking for me than it would be thinking how it could go. But they're certainly capable of it, right? To your point, if they click on all those keys, this is not even playing a perfect game. Just play well in those areas. This game won't be close. It won't be competitive. Yeah, but I'm just not as confident that that's going to happen, and I certainly hope that I'm wrong. My storylines will be that if the game plays out the way that I predict it will, it'll be second half. The offense seems to have gotten its mojo back. That will be my storyline, Ryan. Is if the game goes the way that I think. It'll be similar to last week offensively. You move it okay. You miss some chances, maybe miss another field goal. Don't close off drives. But second half, you start making those plays and you put that team away and you start feeling a lot better about the offense. Okay, they were running the ball second half. They hit some big plays. They're going to be all right. That's going to do it. If the game goes the way that I hope it goes, the storylines will be, as I mentioned on defense about Cam Hart. But it'll also be, and part of my prediction is I'm just not confident that Al Golden is going to turn the D-line loose again. If I knew that he was going to if I knew 2 things, Ryan, if I knew that they were going to do more in the pass game, RPOs, play action, move in the pocket. Indiana created some big plays in the pass game by moving the pocket. They had that big throwback pass where they kind of rolled right. Remember that play? And then they threw back across for a big gain. If they do some things like that and get the offense going, then the storyline is going to be, okay, the Notre Dame offense woke up. And yeah, they had a little blip, but this is who they are. They're going to be fine. And then the second one is going to be the breakout of Cam Hart and Josh Burnham. That's going to be my storyline, is because if they turn the D-line loose, what is Louisville going to do if Al Golden comes out and says, hey, Wash, man, we're turning your boys loose this week. Okay, go get them. What is Louisville going to do? We got to stop the inside guys. And they're going to put the ends on islands. And that could be a chance for Josh Burnham to say, okay, cool.
Right.
Let me go do my thing. Him and Javonte Jean-Baptiste. So that to me, if the game goes the way that I think it can, if I knew that they were going to really do those things, then those would be my storylines to take away. And my big picture storyline based on my actual prediction is that people are going to say, hey, this Notre Dame team is a really tough team, right? They played 3 straight games against ranked opponents, 2 of them on the road. They've gone on the road and won back-to-back games against ranked opponents. I read somewhere the other day, it's been since 2005, I think. I thought I saw someone say, since Notre Dame, maybe even sooner than that. I have to actually go back. I can't remember what the tweet was, Ryan, but basically it's been a long time since Notre Dame went on the road and won back-to-back road games against ranked opponents.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was back in 2005. They started the season with a road win over Pitt and a road win over Michigan, who are both ranked. So Brady Quinn was a junior at Notre Dame the last time they went on the road and won back-to-back games against ranked opponents. Right? So that would be a good thing. That would be a good thing.
It's only 18 years ago. I don't know what you're talking about, man. It wasn't that long ago.
I know, right? What would they make you, like 13? Right yeah. Back then, you were middle school, just going to go to high school.
You know what made me feel really old yesterday, and I know this is completely off topic, but you remember the pitcher Jamie Moyer?
Oh, yeah. Phillies, Cubs, played in White Sox, played for everybody.
Yeah. So he was on the Phillies for the 08 championship, 07-08 championship. But then he played until 2011. He threw out the first pitch for the Phillies yesterday. Do you know how old Jamie Moyer is?
It's like 60s now, right?
He's 60 years old, man. I'm like, that guy just played last decade. That's insane.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt when I saw the 1988 team at the Ohio State game. I was like, man, like Brian, we're getting old.
He was just playing professional baseball last decade, and he's 60 years old. That's wild to think about, man. Wild.
It is. Ryan, we don't have a lot of questions, so we're just going to quickly answer a few questions here at the end of our prediction show, and then we will dive into our looking at the games that matter most in college football this week to Notre Dame and some other interesting games. So just quickly, got a super chat here from Patrick Fitzgerald.
Patrick says, glad to catch a live show. Glad you could be here. How would you script this first offensive series to get the offense out of their funk and get their confidence back? Would you do anything unique to what we've seen? A lot of pre-snap movement for me.
Yep.
Like Patrick, I would like to see some jet motions, maybe some orbit motions. I just really want to get this. Yeah, I want to get this undersized second level of the defense for Louisville. I want their eyes moving all over the place.
Yes.
They're just kind of like, this is interesting.
You want them looking left, right, Ryan, not straight ahead. Absolutely.
Exactly.
You want to get them moving. I would actually come out with some 11 personnel stuff in the run game. I would have some RPO / run. When I say RPOs, you have to be running the football to do an RPO, right? It's not a called pass play. It's called run play. I would do different things like that. I would move my receivers, not just to create what you referred to, Ryan, which I agree with, but I also want to get my receivers moving just to kind of free them up and get them on the run. I still don't understand why they don't do more with Chris Tyree in motion, because get him moving, and then he's got a little bit of a head start on certain things. Like that would be kind of, why not do that, right? So I want to see them do that. I would like to see them come out and take a couple shots early, but a lot of it's built around get Louisville on its heels, to Ryan's point, which is why one other thing I would do on the maybe it's not the first drive, but it might be the second drive. But part of my script, if I'm a 15-play script guy, part of my script is at some point in time, right in the middle of that script, we're going to speed it up. We're going to go. Hey guys, let's go. If we hit that first play, we're going to go. Let's get going. Yep. And so first time we complete a pass in this series, then we go. Even if it means you get a couple 2-play call situations in there, Ryan. Because the thing I love about 2-play calls is if you're an RPO team, 2-play calls are a thing of beauty. You can literally do those the entire game. Because your next play can be, hey, we're going to run inside zone. Well, and then you're tagging your RPOs with it. Well, look, if they come up and they boom, pull it and throw it, and you can really get some tempo going. So those are all built around the motions, the shifts that Ryan talked about, the tempo, the RPOs. Those are all built around slowing Louisville down. And the best way to slow a fast defense down is to make them think and to make them uncertain of what they're seeing. And they didn't do a good job of that against NC State. They let NC State come out early and just pin their ears back and go. Now, they eventually got to some of that stuff, Ryan, and that's where they got a lot of their big plays from. But it took them a while. And you needed your defense to bail you out. I mean, NC State's first possession was at the 49-yard line going in. You better not do that to Louisville. Because Louisville doesn't – Jack Plummer's not Brennan Armstrong. And the pass game weapons are much better at Louisville than what NC State had. The running back room is much better than what NC State had. So you can't put your offense in those or defense in the situations that you did against NC State, because you won't be able to bail yourself out of those, in my opinion. You won't. So those are things that I would do and that Ryan would do. We're on the same page, Ryan, because we're slow them down by getting them thinking and get them on their heels. If you get an undersized defense thinking and on their heels, you can punish them. There's no doubt about it.
We had another super chat from David Hess. Thank you so much, David. He said, I have a good feeling about this game. Irish 38, Cardinals 17.
I dig it. That would be a score that would make me very happy, because that would mean Notre Dame played very well in all phases of the game, in my view.
Agreed. Quinn Kibler says, how much does down and distance change play calling in the beginning when working off the scripted opening plays?
Big time. I mean, if you're out there and your second play is 13 personnel inside run and your first play was a pass and you get sacked on the first play, you're off the script. You always have that built into what you're doing, and the players know it. Like, hey, listen, if we get into this down and distance situation, so like my third down script my script may have third down, my third play is power out of 21 personnel. But again, I'm in 3rd and 9. I can't run that play. So the players know when you practice it, yes, this is our script, but this is our third down calls. This is our red zone calls. So you always have different things. Like if, let's say, and there's also the positive angle of this too, Ryan, is let's say we rip off a 70-yard run to get down to the 7-yard line on the second play. Well, I'm not calling double posts on the next play, right? I mean, so, hey, now we're in our red zone package, right? If you have a big, hey, now we're in our third down package. Or here's the other one. Your defense, forces a turnover. They punt the ball. You're at your own 4-yard line. Well, our script had us calling 4 verts on the first play of the game. I'm not calling 4 verts necessarily on the first play of the game from our own 4-yard line, right? So now you're doing what? You're in your coming out game plan. So the stuff you practice on Thursday. So the script always is nuanced. I mean, if you are able to just go 15 straight plays and never get off script, you're up 14-0, 21-0. I mean, that's just kind of how that goes, Ryan. You know what I mean? So that way, when people understand scripts, you always get off script when the circumstance calls for you to be more situational. But you practice those things as well. Thursday practices are normally you'll run your script in your offense, but it's third down day, it's red zone day, it's situational day. You'll have a coming out period normally on a Thursday, where coming out means you're backed up, inside your own 20. You have a script for that. If you're back, like when Notre Dame goes to when they were backed up against Ohio State in the first play, they have Sam Hartman just take a quarterback sneak. You've planned for that. Hey, if we get back inside our own 1, Sam, if you see this, just take it and go. Right. And so those are all things you practice during the game. It's not like, oh, crap, we're at our own 1. What do we do? You've practiced those things. You've prepared those things. So it's easy to go off script when a situation that you've also prepared for presents itself. Now, sometimes, Ryan, you're in a 3rd and 4 and your script says you want to run this. I like this on 3rd and 4. Let's stay on it. But a lot of times if something happens positively or negatively, because, again, sometimes it could be you just ripped off a long play and now you're in the red zone and your next 2 plays were going to be play action downfield throws you can't do from the 14, right? But you're now in your red zone package. And so those are the things that down and distance situations absolutely will get you off script. But normally, Ryan, if you convert the third down, go right back on script. Go right back to where you left off. And I've been in a game a couple times, Ryan, where our script worked so well. We're like, hey, let's run through it again. They did nothing to stop us. They did nothing to adjust to us. That doesn't happen as much at this level. That was more of like a D3, 1AA thing where you just play some of these teams that you're just way better than. That's not something that you'd see against Louisville or a team like that. But the way the game is being played, and sometimes you just say, hey guys, we got to get off script pretty quick because they're doing this and we can't run this, and this because of what they're doing, but we got to do this. So there's a lot of things that can get you off script early in the game, some positive, some negative.
Well, at one point, I was an offensive coordinator on the high school level, and I remember that I wrote a script, and I threw my script out in 2 plays because I'm like, we suck. We're not going to be able to do any of this. That's great.
Fortunately, I never had any of those situations, Ryan. Thank goodness. But yeah,
Get out of here.
yeah, this ain't gonna work.
God.
Yeah, but yeah, good question, Quinn. Good question.
We had Irish Blooded with a question who says, what is your take on how much skill players don't get the ball? Is play calling versus quarterback target selection and trust?
Let's say it's both. I mean, somewhat 50-50-ish, you know?
Also, play callers might not call a play for a player also because they don't have trust in them either, though.
Exactly.
Like, trust can really go into it a lot.
Exactly.
I would say trust is the biggest thing for me because, like, usually twofold here. A coach will design plays for a player that they trust very much, right? And then the other side of it is a quarterback will find a player that he trusts very much as well. So if there's a lack of trust, I think you kind of avoid guys sometimes, right? So I think trust is actually the biggest factor for me. Irish Blooded of like, why isn't I getting a football? Because there's probably a lack of trust there for some reason. You know what I mean? So I think trust is a big thing for me.
I think it's also play calling from the standpoint of it's not always about trust. That's true. We agree there. But sometimes it's like, hey, we're calling these plays and we've got these backside. We really think we can hurt them with some backside post concepts. Well, backside post is coming off of they did this with your initial read, come backside to the post. Well, if they're not doing anything to take you off your first read, you may have been open 3 times on a backside post route, but like, well, yeah, but the read never took me there. And that's where kind of play calling where now you've got to say, hey, look, we're getting open. So you've got to call it and coach it to your quarterback to say, hey, listen, next time we call this, eye the safety, because if he does this, we want to come back to the post, even though the curl flat may be open over here or the smash may be open. We want to take a shot on this post play. And that's where play calling can come into play where, like the Ohio State game with Chris Tyree coming open so often on the backside, eventually the coaches need to be like, hey, Sam, we need you to look there, right? We need you to come back to that. And so that's where the play calling aspect comes in too. To alongside of, it's like with anything, man, there's different factors that go into things. It's never just like one thing in a circumstance like this. But if I'm Sam Hartman, I understand why he doesn't have as much faith in the outside receivers because he's given them chances. Jaden Thomas, he gave him a chance against NC State. He didn't make the play. Gave Tobias multiple chances last week. Didn't make the plays. But that's why I say if you're Sam Hartman, you're a captain, you're a leader, you're a 6-year guy. It's your job as the quarterback and the leader to say, what can I do to get Tobias going? What can I do to get Chris Tyree going? And sometimes we say it's the coach has got to say this. Well, you know what matters more to a receiver than the coaches coming up and telling them they love them, Ryan? To your point, it's when the quarterback does it. Hey, man, I know you had a rough game, but I believe in you. I'm going to get you the ball this week. I need you to step up and make those plays, right? But I'm going to get you the ball. Yep. And that's one of those things where like, you know what, man, I'm going to go out there and play for this guy. So I want to know that Sam Hartman's doing those things as well. That's also part of what being a leader is all about, Ryan. Sometimes you've got to get that trust out of them. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I need to show that I trust them. Maybe even if I don't, right? To give them the confidence they need to say, hey, I got you, right? I got you. And that's part of being a leader, in my opinion.
We had another super chat from John B. Thank you, John. We will see Jaden Greathouse on the outside with Chris Tyree in the game. Like getting our best players on the field together.
I hope so. I don't know if it's going to happen, not Ryan, but you and I have talked a lot about this week. And John B, thank you so much for your super chat. But yeah, I hope so. And that's not a shot at Tobias Merriweather or anybody else. It's just it's a different look that I'd like to see them show. And there's things you can do with Jaden Greathouse that maybe you didn't feel as comfortable with Tobias. That you can that complement with what he's doing with Chris Tyree really well. Run the safeties off with your slot guy, and then do your high lows that way. They like to run those field high lows, right? I would say do that, right? Use Chris Terry, run off the safeties, and then, bring your X backside and Jaden runs a deep end cut and get some ISOs there. There's some things that you can do with that. That certainly I would like to see that. I absolutely like to see that. There's no doubt. I mean, it's your most explosive player and your most dependable player. They play the same position. At some point in time, you've got to figure out ways to get them both on the field.
And when a position's struggling, you go to a guy that is doing well, that can play multiple positions, and that's Jaden Greathouse. I think it's time to load up the plate a little bit more for him. He's, I don't want to say exceeded expectations. This is kind of what I thought he would do at Notre Dame as a freshman, but he has shown that he has the ability to impact the game in multiple ways, steer into his versatility, because he was always a guy, even when he was at Austin Westlake, that we were always clamoring like that kid could play all over the place. He's not just a slot. He's not just an outside guy. Like, he has ability to play everywhere.
Last two here, Ryan. There's one.
Joe Medina says, why do you think some fans seem to be more vocal about Marcus Freeman's mistakes, yet were relatively silent during Brian Kelly constantly choking in big games? Seen more fire Marcus Freeman comments than I ever saw for BK. I think part of it is, I think part of it, not what's that?
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. I was also going to say that.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say that Marcus Freeman doesn't have a long resume of being successful as a head coach. Right. You know what I mean? So it's like Brian Kelly was a successful coach at a couple different schools before he came to Notre Dame. So I think in people's mind when he first got there, they're like, it's a good coach, right? Like, it's a good coach. Yeah. For Marcus Freeman, and this is fair, I think some people still think of like, is he really a good head coach yet? I'm still not sure. Like,
that's exactly what I'm saying. It's exactly we're saying the same thing, Ryan. Absolutely. Confirmation bias is this. Well, I know Brian Kelly can win. He won at Central Michigan. He won at Grand Valley. He won at Cincinnati. So when he makes a mistake, it's just a bad game. But I know that he's going to do this. And so it's confirmation bias. When a lot of the people that are saying those things about fire Marcus Freeman, guarantee you 90-some% of those are either A, just miserable people, which is a smaller number, or B, people that didn't think this is the right hire, and they are the ones that like, this isn't a learn on the job place. Well, and then it gets into, he's only making this mistake because he's young, right? Whereas when Brian Kelly make a mistake, stuff happens sometimes, but he's a veteran coach, he'll get him through it. So I think it has to do with that. It's the confirmation bias of, one guy is inexperienced. You didn't think he should be the guy. You thought they should have hired Luke Fickell or some other guy to be the head football coach. And so, every time there's a mistake, you're going to fire him. I mean, there's always other reasons for people to have those type of opinions. But I think a lot of it has to do with that, because some of the people that I know that I like that are hammering Marcus Freeman, it's the first time that he made a mistake this year of not having the team ready or not making it. It was immediately, I knew he was in over his head. No comments like that the first 4 games of the year, none. Right. And when Notre Dame comes back and beats Duke, it's nothing but criticism because he might have played for the field goal and things like that. I'm like, that's not. If you think that's a dumb comment, I got news for you. That's not even in Brian Kelly's top 10 of ignorant post-game comments that he made at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? This is the same clown that decided, hey, let's run a jet sweep inside the 5-yard line to a guy that's never ran a jet sweep before in a game, right? Hey, we got a freshman quarterback. All we need is a field goal to win. Let's roll out and throw a fade into the end zone with our freshman quarterback who can't throw the ball more than 30 yards really accurately right now, Tommy Rees. You know what I mean? It's not a shot on Tommy. That's a shot on Brian Kelly. But that's, and you know what he said after the game? Get used to it. It's like, okay, well, we did, we got used to stupid things like that. But because he's a veteran coach, they would just, and I even explained away why they did it at the time. Not that I thought it was the right call, but you explained, well, here's why they did it. They're taking a shot, whatever. I just didn't like the call. And so it's that right there, Ryan. It's, well, this guy's young. So when he makes a mistake, it's because he shouldn't have been the guy anyway. Where when a veteran head coach, you're like, hey, look, all coaches have bad days. All coaches make mistakes. So it's confirmation bias. So I think you and I are saying the exact same thing, just a little bit differently. Yep. Little quick super chat here from Nathan Milton. I'm going to make you read this, Ryan. Thank you, Nathan.
Reminder, BK sucks. # so petty. We tried to warn you, LSU.
We did. We did. We did.
I actually did have my first LSU fan message me on X the other day that said, yeah, you guys may have been right about Brian Kelly.
Yeah. I've had now 2 people reach out with that as well, Ryan. So, yep, you were right. And there's a lot more of them that think it. They're just not willing to say it yet.
Yes.
That's
well, if they lose to
absolutely
Missouri this week, then that will that
It
might
is
push that
over.
envelope a little
It is
more.
over. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I just want to say, Mark says, IB Nation, what's up? Going to the hospital in the morning sometime around 9 o'clock for the newest Notre Dame fan will be here. So Mark is having yet another child. And so, Mark, congratulations. That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
God
Ryan
bless
is
you.
not going to look super happy about you having a new kid because Ryan is still dealing with having a new child of his own and his lack of sleep.
Just sleep
So,
deprived. Yep.
yes, but Mark, congratulations, man. Very, very much. We're happy for you and hope everything goes well with you and the mom and the baby tomorrow. So congratulations. Just wanted to say that before we moved on to the next topic here.
Mark, sleep tonight, buddy. Sleep tonight.
That's right. So, Ryan, I want to dive into this last section. This is going to be something that we're going to put up on our CFB Nation channel, which is presented by Twisted Tea. That is our sponsor for our CFB channel this year, which we are happy to be partnered with Twisted Tea this year. We actually even had some Twisted Tea at our tailgate last weekend, Ryan, that was provided by Twisted Tea. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at some of the big games from the weekend, and especially from the standpoint of games that impact Notre Dame. And some of them are just like, dude, we've got to talk about this game. It's too big of a game. So it's twofold. But there's a lot of games this weekend, right? It's a really good slate of college football, in my opinion. Even tomorrow night, there are some games that I'm looking forward to seeing that Nebraska-Illinois game because those are 2 teams heading in the wrong direction. Which one can right the ship? Kansas State and Oklahoma State, similar thing. Kansas State, had that loss in Missouri, which is looking a whole lot better now, because then they lose at Missouri on like a last-second field goal. I believe it was at Missouri, right? Well, that's looking a whole lot better now that Missouri's looking still undefeated, and Oklahoma State's reeling. So those are going to be 2 games we look at. But the big ones, Ryan, that are going to matter most for Notre Dame, and matter Notre Dame in what regard? It helps their resume. Maybe a team ahead of them gets knocked off. Maybe a team behind them gets knocked off, or just look, it's just all part of the chaos that we hope to see in college football this year. And the first game, Ryan, is very interesting as far as how it impacts Notre Dame, because this is actually a game where I'm going to take a little bit of a contrarian view, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. But noon tomorrow, 12 noon Eastern on ABC, it's the Red River Shootout. And yes, it will always be the Red River Shootout to me. In Dallas, Texas, it will be the number 3 Texas Longhorns against the number 12 Oklahoma Sooners. Both teams are 5-0 and undefeated coming into this game, Ryan. Obviously, Oklahoma is going to be looking for a little bit of payback after the absolute annihilation that happened to them last year. Now, I was told on good authority that the only reason Texas scored 49 points against Oklahoma is because Dylan Gabriel didn't play at quarterback for Oklahoma. Now, I'm not quite sure how that makes any sense, but yes, 49-0 last year, Ryan, was the score of the game. Obviously, Oklahoma has won a few more of these in recent years, but I'll tell you what, they have played some really good games, and Texas has actually pulled off some upsets recently in years where you're a little surprised by it. So, but Oklahoma had won the previous 4 coming into this matchup, including the 2018 Big 12 title game, which was a rematch of an incredibly entertaining game the regular season. If you remember, that's when Dicker the kicker became kind of a thing. He nailed that long field goal at the end of that game in 2018. Oklahoma got payback in the Big 12 title game. So this is the first time in a while, Ryan, that you really looked at this, and Texas is now considered the team to beat. In past, even when Texas has won, it was usually an upset because Texas wasn't very good. Things have flipped a little bit, but Oklahoma's 5-0 to start the season, looking pretty good in some games, a little sloppy in others. Let's talk about this game, Ryan. What do you see? And then what is your opinion on what outcome is best for Notre Dame?
Well, this is a really interesting game because I feel like for the most part of these pick'ems this week, I actually tended more towards the favorites than I typically do. I feel like there's usually a couple games where I'm like, I kind of like the underdog here. I kind of like him in the home team, the away team. For this one, I really trended to Texas for a couple reasons. One is that I am a big believer in what Texas is doing offensively. I think that they've really turned a corner. You knew that it was going to happen eventually once Steve Sarkisian got everything rolling, at least offensively. The question was obviously, can the offensive line be good enough? Can the defense kind of, meet the offense to their effectiveness whenever that did happen? And I really think that offensively, Texas won. The offensive line so far has played a lot better than they did last year, a whole worlds better than what they were last year. Quinn Ewers has looked like a completely different quarterback, has really taken that next step. You now have wide receivers everywhere that are playing good ball. Xavier Worthy looks good again. Jordan Whittington. You had A.D. Mitchell transfer over from Georgia, looks like an absolute stud. Jatavion Sanders, a tight end. The Brooks kid at running back that I didn't know much about is really having a strong start to the season as well. So you have skill position players everywhere. Defensively, I still have question marks as far as I want to see a couple more games before I get on the bandwagon a little bit. Like defensive back wise, I still think that they're susceptible to some big plays in the secondary. Defensive line wise, they've been good so far, but like what's their pass rush upside as a unit? I still question that because there's a lot of big bodies, but what is the penetration upside of that unit? But ultimately, I just think that they're a better team than Oklahoma right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think Oklahoma is trending in the right direction. They're definitely better than they were last year.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Especially
Dylan
defensively.
Gabriel, yes. Defensively, they're worlds better. They're playing good football in there. And having Dylan Gabriel compared to not having Dylan Gabriel is big for that offense, which is why I think that they will score a bit against Texas. But ultimately, I think that Texas just has too much firepower. I'm going to go Texas 31-21, where I think that the game actually is a little bit more decided than what that final score indicates.
Okay.
Like this might be like Texas scores early in the fourth quarter to make it 31-14. And then Oklahoma scores one down the stretch of the game to cut it to 10, and then hopefully, try to get the ball back one more time, that type of situation. Yeah. So give me Texas in this one in somewhat decisive fashion. Oklahoma's moving in the right direction, but I think Texas is showing legitimacy at this point.
Ryan, I'll say this. One of the concerns I had up until today was, would Jatavion Sanders play? Because I think he is a very important piece. Now, they have a lot of other weapons, but I think having him kind of playing over the middle and some of the things he can do in the pass game really makes that thing click. And he injured his ankle last week. It was questionable whether the play Sark announced. I just saw an article from this morning from the Texas Fan Nation site that he is going to play this week, which is big to me. I think this game is going to be a little bit more high scoring. Oklahoma's defense is definitely better, but they have not played a good offense really all year. I mean, they really haven't. They've played Arkansas State is just terrible. SMU's offense is pretty good. That's probably the best performance they had. Cincinnati's offense stinks. Iowa State's offense stinks. And they've done what they're supposed to do. They've done what they're supposed to do against those teams. And so, so credit to them. But this is not a Sonny Dykes SMU team either. You know what I mean? They're not quite as good as under Rhett Lashley offensively they've been in the past. I do think their defense is better. I don't think it's as better as it has shown so far. I think also when I look at Texas's defense, that's another one. You mentioned about the Alabama game. There were some opportunities there. Jalen Milroe didn't take advantage of them, where that game maybe should have been a little bit higher scoring for Alabama. Yeah. I felt the same thing was true. Ryan, have you had a chance to go back and watch the all 22 of that game yet? But I felt
Alabama, Texas,
the Kansas Texas game.
Oh, Kansas, Texas. Yeah. Nah, not too much. Just
okay. But what I think you'll see, what I saw was there was guys open for Kansas, but having Jason Bean and not having Jalen Daniels hurt that. So I actually think Oklahoma was going to score on Texas a little bit. So I think this is going to be a little bit more of a higher scoring game, something like 38-27, 41-31, something like that. I think we're going to see something like that. Now, Texas actually, interestingly, Ryan, has not been like lighting the world on fire with like 50, 60-point games like Washington has done, but they've just been consistent. Yeah. And I think this is the game where they because they had a lot of opportunities. They should have scored 50 plus on Kansas last week as well. They had their own missed opportunities last week. But as you said, their offensive line's playing better, and that's really the key for me is the balance that they're able to strike. And I don't know that Oklahoma's going to be able to stop that.
Could you imagine Bijan Robinson on this team this year would have been
with this O-line? Well, they're finally looking like a Kyle Flood offensive line. They're not like a dominant group where they're coming out and just blowing people up, but they're playing well as a unit. Yep. And that's been the key. They've had some decent, like last year, they had good talent. It just was really young. Well, all those young guys are now a little bit older and they're playing well together. And so, Kelvin Banks is still not completely there yet, but he's definitely better, and he's going to end up being a really good player when it's all said. He's just young. He's a true sophomore now, right? Right, Ryan? So they're a good football team. I think they're going to win this game. And I'll say this from a Notre Dame standpoint, Ryan, I think Texas winning this game is actually better for Notre Dame. And the reason I say that is because if Oklahoma beats Texas, Texas is not falling behind Notre Dame, and Oklahoma will leap Notre Dame from a ranking standpoint. The worst thing for Notre Dame, and this is true in every conference, is to have multiple playoff contenders in a league. Look, there's a chance someone from the Big 12 is going to get in. What you don't want to be at the end of the year sitting there, and this is like the worst case scenario for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's in there at 11-1. Texas beats Oklahoma in the regular season. Oklahoma beats Texas in a close game in the Big 12 title game, and they're both sitting there at 12-1. And Texas has a win over Alabama. Worst case scenario. So you want one of these teams to lose twice. Someone from the Big 12 is going to have a pretty good shot at getting in this year. You just need to make sure it's not two. And it's going to be the same thing I say in the SEC, although the SEC is kind of taking care of that for us. Same thing in the Pac-12, same thing in the Big 10, right? I don't care about Florida State winning all their games. They need to make sure that Florida State and Clemson didn't win all their games. And fortunately, Clemson is kind of taking care of that for us. So I feel like if Oklahoma wins, they will leap Notre Dame in the rankings, and it won't be Texas going from 3 to 11. You know what I mean? It'll be, unless it's like a blowout, which I don't see happening. So I actually think it's better for Notre Dame to see Texas win. And plus, I have really come to despise the Oklahoma fan base, if I'm just going to be completely honest with you, over the last year. And so I'm also rooting for Texas to win that game, if I'm just being completely honest with you. Just being honest with y'all.
And I'm not a Brett Venables fan, so I'm there, man.
Yeah, definitely not that. Ryan, I got to tell you, man, the noon slate has some really good games on it. There's another good one at noon we'll briefly talk about, Maryland at Ohio State. I fully expect Ohio State to win this game. But I'm going to tell you, just as an aside, Mike Locksley has done a really nice job with this team. This is a good Maryland team. Like, do I think they're going to win 10, 11 games? No. Do I think they're going to be Ohio State on the road? No. Do I think it's going to be close? Probably not. But this 5-0 start for Maryland, to me, so far has not been a fluke. They have dominated the teams they've played, including 3 Power 5 teams, Ryan. It's not like, Michigan State's not very good. Indiana, they blew Indiana out in ways that Louisville and Ohio State did not. Right. Yeah. I mean, so you have some comparisons there. Blew out Virginia.
That Virginia game was close a little bit early on in that one.
They poured it on them, though, in the second half. They poured it on them in the second half. But that's kind of what you want to see, right? I think it was tied at halftime, wasn't it? If I remember correctly, it was like tied at halftime.
I remember that was the week of the Central Michigan game, and we were watching that game, and I was like, "Wow, Virginia's really playing Maryland tough." And then all of a sudden,
I'll give Tony Elliott credit. I'll give Tony Elliott credit because his team's not very good, but they've battled. I mean, they battled Boston College last week. They battled NC State. They lost both those games by 3. They battled James Madison, only lost by 1. The only team that really kind of blew them out early was Tennessee in the opener. That's really it. That's really it. But I do like what Mike Locksley has done. Mike Locksley has done with this team. I do. And I've been very hard on him in the past. I'm curious if they can maintain it moving forward. That's my big question mark. I think they're going to catch an L this week, but then they have a couple more winnable games. Illinois coming up after that. Then Northwestern, they'll have Illinois, a bye, and then Northwestern. If they lose this game, I really want to see how this team bounces back because I really like this Maryland team. I do. I don't think they have a chance to beat Ohio State. I don't. But I like this team because they're not just relying on like the couple good athletes to make plays. They're actually a little bit of a better all-around team than they've been in the past, in my opinion. But it's not going to be enough to beat the Buckeyes, in my opinion.
They're a pesky little team, is how I would kind of phrase Maryland.
That's good.
Like I just think they're going to keep it kind of close with Ohio State. Like, I mean, Ohio State probably separates themselves at the end, but like, I wouldn't be shocked if this was like a 10-point game in the early fourth quarter where it's like, oh, if Maryland just gets one stop, they might be able to get back in this football game, and then they proceed not to. But I mean, they have some guys, man. The Hemby kid at running back's pretty good. Talia Tagovailoa, man, I know that he is like terribly inconsistent, But his goods are really, really good, man.
Yeah.
Like he gets to throw sometimes where you're like, oh, all right.
It's
cool,
maddening
man.
watching him
Cool.
play sometimes, man. It really
Sometimes he
is
lights
maddening
out,
watching him play
man.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very
Yep.
talented, but
Yep.
yes, he's just that guy that's like super inconsistent. So I expect a good outing for Maryland. Again, I expect Ohio State to win as well, but I do think that Maryland is kind of just like a pesky little team that's not going to go out easy.
Right. It's like in past years, like they'd have that former 5-star running back Anthony Richardson. They'd have a couple like former really highly ranked recruits that were receivers, and then it was just like, okay, those guys are good, and then the rest is not. Like their receiving core to me is an epitome of what you're talking about, Ryan. Is like there's no star that I see anyway. You may look at there may be some NFL draft guys see, but they don't have that big name receiver they've had in past years. They're just all really good athletes that play the game and make plays. And Tully is spreading the ball around more this year than he has in the past. So I really like what they're doing. I think pesky is a really good way of describing it. Now, somebody's asked, does it hurt Notre Dame if Ohio State loses? I don't think it does, because in the perception of fans and the perception of the AP Top 25, it does. But I have always said this: the College Football Playoff Committee has always been adamant that they care more about your wins than your losses. Clemson got in 2016 with a November loss at home to Pitt, right? Notre Dame's playoff resume is going to be built around teams they beat. I believe it's actually better for Notre Dame that Ohio State loses multiple times, because if you're in a situation where Ohio State goes 12-0 or 11-0, and then Michigan goes 11-0, and then Michigan beats Ohio State, and then Michigan wins the Big Ten title, Notre Dame is screwed, because Ohio State will be the team that probably gets in, because they'll have the head-to-head advantage, and they beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame, right? So to me, you either want Ohio State to completely run the table, which is fine, but I would say that if they're going to lose, you want them to lose multiple times. So losing a game like this to Maryland would most likely lead to this isn't as good of a team as maybe we thought, and they're probably going to drop another game, which means that they're out. But this is not that game. I don't think Maryland's going to be able to beat Ohio State. But I also didn't think Indiana was going to be able to hang with them at all any period of time. And I'm curious to see who Ohio State really is, Ryan. I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I think we know they're pretty good on defense, but I still don't know who their offense is. I mean, that Western Kentucky game right now is the anomaly of who they are. It really is. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to be. I still think they're going to be a really good November team. A really good November team. So another noon game, Ryan, we'll talk about briefly, is number 23 LSU at number 21 Missouri. The weird thing about some of these games is these are all like Central and teams in there. So they're actually, a lot of these are 11, like the Missouri LSU game. That's an 11 a.m. kickoff local time. Texas, Oklahoma that's always been that way. And an 11 o'clock kickoff time, which I think is very interesting. But number 23 LSU at number 21 Missouri. As much as I would love to see Missouri win this game, I just don't know if they have the firepower on offense like the Florida State had, like an LSU had to win the game. But man, I hope I'm wrong about that one.
I'm glad that we didn't have to pick these ones for this game for the site, because I honestly get to see this game going either way. Like part of me says LSU is the more talented team as a skill position. I mean, look, Jaden Daniels is playing really good football so far. He's playing really, really good football. Malik Neighbors is a guy. The Brian Thomas kid, number 11, the other wide receiver, has been playing fantastic football as well. Logan Diggs actually had a pretty good game last week as well, from what I saw.
A couple.
So, yeah. So, I mean, they have a lot of talents. There's no doubt about it. But coming off a big loss like they did against Ole Miss, is Missouri a more mentally tough football team? Because they've been kind of scrapping along, man. Yeah. It's like they also have some talent. Obviously, Luther Burden is leading college football in receiving. So, like, I think that either Missouri wins a close one or LSU wins somewhat handedly, like by 10 points, 14 points, something like that. I think that's a close game in the fourth quarter, though. I might lean Missouri to even that out, because I think they might be a little bit more mentally tough. I don't know.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, Ryan. Part of me, look, I'll tell you this: if Missouri wins this game going away, though, it means because LSU quit on Brian Kelly.
That's what I'm saying. I think like mentally they're just not in there, and they're like, close game. We're not winning this one.
I'm almost to the point, Ryan, where I kind of believe this is going to be a blowout one way or the other.
Really?
Because LSU, and here's why because it's a mindset thing. Because mentally LSU either comes out and puts it all together because they're pissed off and they want to bounce back and all that kind of stuff. And then I just don't think Missouri has the fire. So, well, Luther Burden's really good. Yes, he is. He's been great this year. But LSU has like 3 dudes that can cut. Not 3 dudes as good as him, but like they have 3 big-time weapons at wide receiver. Logan Diggs is averaging over 6 yards a carry, and he missed the first game. He's averaging almost 100 yards a game, and then one of the games he played, they didn't play him a whole lot. He's had, I think, a couple 100-yard games so far, I believe. He's had at least one. His first game back, he was over 100 yards. Let me look here real quick. Yeah, he was 101 against Ole Miss and 115 against Grambling, and went for 14 for 97 for against Arkansas. So he's been pretty good for them when they use him. Didn't play a whole lot against Grambling because none of their starters did. But I just feel like if LSU is going to win this game, they're going to come out and they're going to be lights out and play good football, and they're going to do to Missouri sort of what they did to Arkansas or Mississippi State. If they don't, then it means that they're just not in it. And this looks like a fragile team psyche-wise, and you wonder like how they bounce back. And if they don't bounce back, Ryan, here's the thing: I don't think if it's a fair fight and both teams kind of bring it, I don't think Missouri can beat LSU, but I think it can be a competitive game. That's where I believe if they both play well. But if LSU doesn't bring it mentally, this is a good enough Missouri team to hurt them and hurt them bad. And I gained a ton of respect for their quarterback last week. Sick, not feeling good. He was questionable all week, and not only does he play, but he plays lights out last week, Ryan. And they've played 2 quality teams so far this year, and they beat a good Kansas State team, in my opinion. I think that's a good Kansas State team. I think Memphis is a quality team this year, Ryan. I think Memphis is a quality team, and they didn't play great against Memphis, but they showed me that they can win. And it was a close game, but it was a game that Missouri was always kind of winning. You know what I mean? It's like they would go up 10 and Memphis would score. They go up 14 and Memphis would score. And say, well, look, Memphis scored the last touchdown to make it 34-27. That only came a minute and 20 seconds after Missouri scored to make it 34-20. It was one of those kind of games. And that's where I get a little bit nervous about this game, Ryan, because I saw Memphis go out and move the ball on Missouri and throw for 300 yards. And it's just like that kind of concerns me with this LSU pass offense, because as you said, Jaden Daniels is playing at a high level. But man, I hope I'm wrong, and LSU just comes out there and just lays an egg. I would love to see that.
I just want to see LSU get their torches out and really start, just banding together.
Yes. Although here's the downside, Ryan. If that happens, it means Eli Drinkwitz gets a program-defining win, and I know how you feel about Eli.
I'll take him getting a program-defining win over BK getting a big victory. So
that's a great point. Great point. So those are some of the big noon games, Ryan. A couple other interesting noon games. Rutgers at Wisconsin. I'm very curious to see how Rutgers plays in this game. Fully expect Wisconsin to win, but Rutgers has been a scrappy team this year. Here's a 2:00 game, Ryan, that we're not going to dive into, but I'll tell you, I'm just going to have my eye on as we're sitting there in the hotel getting ready, and that's Marshall and NC State. Charles Huff has done a really nice job with that Marshall football program. He really has. I mean, they got a new quarterback this year. They lost some of their top weapons from last year, and they're not looking like phenomenal this year. They're lighting the world on fire. They're not scoring a ton. They're 4-0. They got a win over East Carolina on the road. They have a win over Virginia Tech. They're playing at NC State. NC State seems to me kind of like a little bit of a wounded team right now. They're benching their quarterback. They're going to go one of two ways. They're either going to bounce back and start playing like the team that I think they can be, or they could be overlooking NC State a little bit or Marshall a little bit and maybe get caught. I don't know how it's going to go. I just feel like if the quarterback play improves, however, NC State's going to be a better football team pretty quickly. Brendan Armstrong's been terrible the last few games for NC State. So we'll see how it goes.
I had a buddy that's a big gambler that said, what line do you like this week? And I said, give me Marshall plus 6.5. I don't know if they're going to win, but they're going to keep it close, in my opinion.
Yeah, I dig that. He's a name that when we get into the offseason, you're going to hear a lot of people talk about because he's got the pedigree. He coached at Penn State. He coached at Alabama. He's now a head coach, and he's doing well. He's got some big name wins under his resume. And if he can earn a road win over NC State, he's going to like, guys, I've been here a couple of years. I beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. I beat NC State at NC State. I coached at Bama. I coached at Penn State. Notre Dame tried to hire him when Lance Taylor left, but he ended up going to Alabama. But yeah, so he's a guy that you're going to hear a lot about this offseason as a head coach. 3:00 games, some interesting games, Ryan. Washington State at UCLA. That's going to be an interesting game. I like Washington State this year. UCLA is the favorite in that game. I'm a little surprised by that, to be honest with you.
Just
the way that,
yeah.
well, I get that, but it's kind of like they've only played one good team this year, and their offense got destroyed by that one good team. And I think
Utah, people are expecting the Cougars to like come down to earth a little bit at some point, and we'll see if they do or not. But
this could be a big game for them, though, because it is a game that, to your point, that seems to be the case. 3:30, though, Ryan, is we've got some big games at 3:30, and here's one that impacts, I think, Notre Dame quite a bit in their standing. That's number 11 Alabama at Texas A&M. Now, my first question is, how is 3-2 LSU ranked, but 4-1 Texas A&M is not? Their only loss is on the road to number 16, number 17 Miami, right? Coming off two convincing wins over Auburn and Arkansas, which those wins look a lot better when you see how the other teams have played against them. But this is a chance for Texas A&M to kind of put themselves on the map. They've been a better team this year. They've got talent, but they're not beating themselves this year, Ryan. I mean, that's really what it kind of boils down to. Now, what are they going to look like game 2 without Connor Wegman? That's a fair question, right? Now you got some film of what a Max Johnson offense looks like, but I'm still not a believer in Alabama because I just don't think Mississippi State's very good, Ryan. So I'm not sure I quite believe in this Bama team yet, but we're going to find out this weekend. Jimbo's going to look for a chance to kind of put a little bit of the nail in the Bama coffin for this season. I don't know if it's going to be like Bama's never going to be great again, but at least for this season, they get a chance to do that. And it's a hey, we're good now type of game for Texas A&M.
Yeah, I'm not buying into Texas A&M fully. I think they are 100% a better football team than they were last year, and they're a lot closer to what they've been hyped up to be over the last couple of years. I think that they have a whole lot of talent, like they've always had a whole lot of talent. I mean, the Evan Stewart kid is a stud. Aeneas Smith, when healthy, is a really good wide receiver. The running back they have, who I had no idea who he was coming into the year, he's playing good football. Defensively, they got guys everywhere on that defensive line. I mean, they have talent. There's never been a doubt about that. They seem a little bit more mentally tough this year, which is why I think that this will be a close football game, because I'm not a believer in Bama. I'm not. I think Bama's defense is good. I think that their offensive line is improving over the last couple games. We'll see if it continues to trend in that direction. But offensively, I think that they're just winning based upon talents, ultimately. Jalen Milroe is a good athlete. They have some good athletes out wide. They have a talented running back room, so they'll create some plays. I think that Alabama edges this one out 24-17, excuse me. I think it's a really close competitive football game, a back and forth football game. I think Texas A&M is going to keep this one very close throughout the entirety of the game. I like what Max Johnson's doing as a backup. For me, like when Texas A&M does pull off upsets against Alabama, it's usually because they have something dynamic at quarterback with the ability to run the football and be an extender and quarterback run game, like the Manziels and even the Trevor Knights of the world, right? Max Johnson's not that guy. Max Johnson's just a really good, sound decision maker, good backup quarterback. I just don't know if that consistently beats Bama, in my opinion. So I'm going to take Bama in this one, in a close one.
The only pushback that I would give is kind of going back to what you said. This isn't a vintage Bama team, right? This isn't a team where you needed a Johnny Manziel and you needed a Chad Kelly at Ole Miss or a Bo Wallace at Ole Miss, who were guys who could make plays with their legs to beat them. This is a team that's just not that team. I'm with you. I'm not sold on Texas A&M yet. They should be in the top 25, especially if the other option is LSU. But I'm not sure that I believe in them yet. But here's why ultimately I'm picking Texas A&M. Because I think Texas A&M is still a team that is going to still ascend this particular team because they are learning a new offense that's somewhat complex. They're going to get better. They have a quarterback that's got the more experience. So I think that actually allows Bobby Petrino to maybe put a little bit more volume in. He's got good weapons to deal with, but it also comes down to Texas A&M is not afraid of Bama. They're not. As bad as they were last year, they had the ball at the end of the game in the red zone with a chance to beat Bama. And then 2 years ago, they beat Bama at their place. So I actually think Bama's going to take a second L in the state of Texas. I do. And I don't like, there's just the body language with this team. Even last week against Mississippi State, Ryan, that was more about Mississippi State sucks than it was. I mean, Bama had like 360 yards of offense in that game. They didn't run it great. They didn't throw it great. And I think this is going to be a similar score to last year's game, but I actually have Texas A&M pulling this one off. I do. Now, I don't know if that's going to result in them going on a run because they got to go to, they get a bye week. They got to play at South Carolina. They got to play Ole Miss. They got to play Florida. They got to play at Auburn. They got to play LSU. But I don't know what it is. I just think this Texas A&M team is just, they're just maybe I'm putting more on this, Ryan, because they were so horribly coached last year that now that they're just competent, I'm maybe giving a little bit too much credit. That's how bad it was last year. That could be it. But I don't know, man. I just like what I've seen from this football team. And I think the win over LSU at the end of the year last year was kind of like when Notre Dame beat LSU in the bowl game in 2014. They had the whole offseason to relish and like, hey, this is what we're capable of when we do what we can do. And it's almost kind of like losing maybe some of the games last year, not making a bowl game benefited them because they would have probably lost whoever they played in the bowl game if they'd have gone 6-6. Let's say they don't get upset by App State and they're 6-6 instead of 5-7. They go to a bowl game, they probably lose, and then it's kind of sitting in their crawl off season. I really think the way they played that LSU game, combined with bringing in Bobby Petrino, has given this team some confidence. And so if Bama's going to win, I don't think it's going to be close. Yeah. I think Bama's going to come out and just jump on them early and all that confidence, gone. But if this is a game that A&M stays in this game, I just think at the end of the day, who do I trust more to make that game-winning play, Max Johnson or Jalen Milroe? I know that Jalen Milroe gets the hype because he's the starter at Alabama, but I just have to keep asking myself, what has he done? Like, what has he done for anyone to think he's a
option in that one? I'd rather not pick either one of those guys. Can I have another option, please?
Yes. That's what you got.
Maybe Wakeman could get back and I could instead.
Hobble out there on crutches, like, all right, I got this. Hey, they'll bring in Tyler Buckner or somebody off the bench. It's not great quarterback play, but I'm going with Bama. Syracuse at North Carolina is going to be an interesting game, Ryan. North Carolina so far has been a much improved defense this season, a much improved defense. I want to see how they handle Syracuse. I want to see how Syracuse bounces back mentally after that tough home loss last week. But North Carolina has been a quality football team so far this year. They have. Yeah. So I'm curious seeing that one too.
And Tez Walker coming back finally was given his eligibility back. So
look, and they're like, did you see the shade they threw at North Carolina? Well, if North Carolina would have given this beforehand, maybe we would have made a different decision. Like, that's going to be interesting.
Sure, guys.
Oh my goodness.
You made a mistake from the beginning. You tried to stick to your guns, and when they were like eventually like, oh, they're not backing down. All right, fine, you guys can have it. Go ahead.
This is the thing you want to stick to your guns about. Like, come on, guys. Right. Just ridiculous. UCF at Kansas is going to be a very interesting game, Ryan. I am shocked that UCF is a road favorite over Kansas. It's like I feel like the odds makers.
Is he playing? Is Jalen Daniels playing?
He's supposedly going to play because he was supposed to play last week, but his back tightened up the morning of the game. Gotcha. But it's like, did we're just going to ignore what Kansas looked like the first 4 games and just go off of last week? And I'm just not. Like you said, UCF's coming off of a loss to Baylor, a home loss to Baylor. They got smacked by
like 3 quarters.
Yeah. they got smacked by Kansas State and they barely beat Boise State, and yet they're a road favorite over Kansas. That's an interesting one to me. Very interesting one to me. Couple other ones, Ryan. 7:00. This is going to be a very intriguing game. Number 20 Kentucky at number 1 Georgia. Now, I fully expect Georgia to win this football game, but here's the question that I have. 14.5-point favorites for the Dogs. Yes. Number 1 is what we saw last week, sort of a fluke by Kentucky. Or is this a Kentucky team that can physically do this consistently? Not running for 10 yards a carry, but just being physical up front. Can Devin Leary give them more? Because they did what they did to Florida last week with Devin Leary doing nothing.
69 yards
and does the light go on for Georgia? Like, I keep waiting on that light to go on for Georgia. Was the comeback against Auburn what they needed? Or is this just kind of who Georgia is moving forward? And if it is, then this is going to be a entertaining game, like a hard-fought game. If the light goes on for Georgia, then it could be good. Because look, Ryan, Georgia's played 2 Power 5 teams this year. They trailed for chunks of the game in both of them. They were down 14-3 at halftime to South Carolina at home. They were losing to Auburn for a chunk of the game on the road. This Kentucky team's better than both of those teams, in my opinion. It's going to be a very interesting game, Ryan. What say you?
I actually think that Georgia's going to win this one decisively. I don't know why exactly. Yeah. Maybe it's me buying into they'll have a little bit of a wake up call after last week's, kind of tough, hard-fought last-minute victory where they kind of need a little bit of hero ball from Brock Bowers. I mean, maybe that's what's in my mind, but I think ultimately what I saw from Kentucky was great, but I don't know if it's sustainable to like the overall arching. Like, Ray Davis is a good running back. I think their offensive line is improved than what it was last year, but they won that game decisively against Florida, thrown for 69 yards. Like, it felt similarly to like Notre Dame Clemson last year, right? Where you're just like, that's awesome, but can you do that every game and win? And ultimately Notre Dame couldn't do that every game and win, because eventually a team's going to be like, you're not running like that again. Like, we're not going to let you do that. And I feel like Georgia is going to say, Kentucky, we are low in the box. Devin Leary, beat us if you can beat us. Like, I feel like that's what this game's going to come down to. And I haven't been overly impressed by Devin Leary from what I've seen at Kentucky so far. Like, he hasn't looked great to me. So
I think that more like the guy from last year than the guy from 2 years ago. Would you agree with that?
I really like Devin Leary too, but yeah, I would agree with that.
We had him in our top 5 quarterbacks in college football going into the season last year because of how good he was the year before and his arm talent. But yeah, he's been disappointing. Does last year's game have any factor in this for you, Ryan, based on, because again, there's all Kentucky's going to come into this game saying, hey guys, we can play with Georgia. Well, what makes you think that? We did it last year, right? They beat us 16-6. We kind of did a pretty good job shutting their offense down. Now, the problem is that Georgia said, we're going to shut down your run game and make your quarterback beat us. And they didn't have that guy at quarterback last year. And to your point, we don't know that they have that guy at quarterback this year either, with the way that Devin Leary's played. Great. So it's going to be interesting. Kentucky's not, but that could also be the counter, Ryan, is they do think they can beat Georgia. So maybe they feel a little better about themselves than they should. And this is the game that Georgia wakes up, right? Like, I can see it going both ways.
I mean, it could go either way. I just ultimately think that I just haven't been impressed enough by Kentucky throwing the football for me to be like, they're going to be able to do that in this game against Georgia. And I just think last week's going to be a little bit like, hey guys, we just can't take some teams for granted, right? Like, we can't do that. Like, let's wake up a little bit. Like, we're not playing great ball right now. And Georgia still has a lot of talent. So I think they'll eventually figure it out. So yeah,
I thought that was going to happen after South Carolina, though, Ryan. That's kind of where I'm like, maybe this is just who Georgia is.
I hope maybe this is just who they are. I hope it keeps continuing, because I like Liam Cohen. I really like Mark Stoops, and the running back Ray Davis is a great story. He was a Temple kid, really good player at Temple, blew out his knee, ends up at Vanderbilt, was quietly an all-SEC performer last year, running for 1,000 yards on a bad offense for Vanderbilt, and now he's flourishing under Liam Cohen. So I hope they can give him a game.
I just have a feeling that Kentucky can stay in this one, but it's going to happen early, Ryan. The fear is that Georgia just comes in out there and overwhelms you early. But if they can make this a 4-quarter game, then I think Kentucky can stay with them, and they did it last year. Arkansas at Ole Miss will be an intriguing game that I'll have my eye on. Got one more here, Ryan. Oregon State at Cal. Justin Wilcox needs a game like this, man. They're 3-2. They've got a brutal schedule coming up. They've got to earn some kind of upset win. That'll be an interesting. But the last one we're going to discuss, Ryan, as we go through this, we wrap this up, is Arizona at USC. Now, I think we both agree that what's best for Notre Dame is for USC to win this game. We actually never talked about that with some of those others. The Alabama, Texas A&M thing, I think Alabama losing is best for Notre Dame. We actually should have addressed that. because if Notre Dame's got one loss, A&M's going to lose again. They just are. Right? They just are. You knock Bama out, give them their second loss, the SEC West is done. Like there's not going to. I mean, Ole Miss is going to lose again. Texas A&M's going to lose again. Bama and LSU both catch losses. So we didn't address that, but we just addressed it. Kentucky, Georgia, that's an obvious one. Obviously, if Georgia loses, that's great for Notre Dame, But let's talk about USC, Arizona. We both, I believe, actually, I shouldn't speak first. I believe USC winning is best for Notre Dame.
I would agree.
Right.
I mean, it's a straight the schedule thing, right? Like Arizona has no they have nothing to gain to you. It's like if Arizona's good, that's cool, but like they're not.
You don't need USC to lose. You don't just like you didn't need Ohio State to lose. You needed to be the loss Ohio State got is to be from you.
Right.
You need the loss from USC to be from you. But it is an intriguing matchup because I really like what I don't think they're going to win this game, but I really like what Judd Fish is doing there. I'll be honest, Ryan, I didn't love the hire when they made it.
It was kind of weird. He was like an NFL guy for a while. And
he was with the Broncos for a while. He'd been in college here and there, but it was like, what's his connection to Arizona? I didn't understand that one. But then you look at it and you're like, he's recruited well.
Yep.
And they're a scrappy team. Like the loss of Mississippi State to me, that was the frustrating one. And then they had the ugly win over Stanford, but they won. But they're sitting here now at 3-2. They're coming off a game in which they battled Washington. Washington was the better team, but they battled.
Yep.
They've got some weapons on offense that can do damage to USC, in my opinion, that could make this game maybe a little bit more higher scoring than USC would like it to be.
I think that it's so weird, Brian, because we always talk about like, is that a one-off? Is that a trend? USC letting Colorado do what they did right at the end of that football game and letting them crawl back in. Like, is that an anomaly or is that a trend? I think it's a little bit of a trend. I picked USC to win 41-34 because I just think that USC is going to have a tough time closing teams out a little bit. They're going to get up because they're a very talented offense. I don't think Arizona has the dogs defensively to match up against all of them, right? Like Washington and Singer and Branch, and they just don't have enough guys. Brandon Rice, like there's just a lot of wide receivers and talent for USC. So I think USC gets off to a pretty good start and maybe even a big lead early in this game. But Arizona, to your point, is one, Jaden Delore is a very volatile quarterback. He's kind of like the Pac-12 version of like Talia Tagovailoa. Like he's kind of the same type of dude, right? But when he's good, he's pretty dang good. Like he's very good. And he's got the
UCLA last year, Ryan. Go ask UCLA last year, right?
Exactly. He's got the McMillan kid, a wide receiver who's a stud, like the 6'4" kid. He's really good. Jacob Cowing is a really good slot, really undersized but good. Michael Wiley,
tight end's a good football player too, Ryan. That McLaughlin kid, he's a pretty good football player.
He's a legitimate rosterable NFL kid at tight end. Like probably a tight end 2, tight end 3 on the next level. And then Michael Wiley's he's been banged up, the running back, but like he's good, man. When he plays, and the Coleman kid's not bad either, the backup. Right. So they have some skill position players. I don't think USC is going to be able to shut them down, which is why I think Arizona will score a little bit. But ultimately, I'm going to take Caleb Williams to win the game. But I just think that it's one of those games where I don't think that USC is going to win a ton of games this year where it's just like decisive 50-something to 10 because I just don't think that defense is good enough.
They did that to the bad teams, but against the decent teams, to your point, because, look, I think Arizona's got a better offensive line than Colorado. I think if you stack up Colorado's better offensive line. If you stack up Colorado's receivers against Arizona's receivers, you may argue Colorado has more depth, but none of the Colorado kids are as good as McMillan. I mean, and he was a kid that
not right now. Without Travis Hunter, I would actually say that Arizona has a better wide receiver core right now. So
So it's just, and then you watch what happened with Arizona State. I mean, with Drew Pine at quarterback, they kept moving the ball on USC and kept scored 28 points. That is a bad Arizona State offense, like a really bad Arizona State offense. And, one that scored 0 points and had 230 yards of offense against Fresno State, scored 15 points and 277 yards of offense against Oklahoma State. Neither of those. I mean, the Fresno State game's actually not something to be all down on them about, because what's surprising about Fresno State this year, Ryan, is they've been really good on defense so
Yeah.
far this year. Against the teams they've played, but still, you're a Power 5 team. They're a Mountain West team. You should think you should at least get some points on them. And then they go out there and scored 28 on USC and kept moving the ball. I mean, it was a 35-28 game at one point in time, Ryan. In that. Now, you never thought Arizona State was going to win, but it just was kind of like this team just can't make stops, and they need to make stops against teams that aren't even that good on offense. And then once Colorado kind of figured some things out last week, and Colorado had some missed opportunities early in that game too, Ryan. Yep. And I'll be honest with you, I think Sean Lewis is a really good offensive mind, but early in that game and late in that game, I just was like, what are you doing? Like, what are we doing here? Yeah. So did you ever finally watch the end of that game? You watch all 22, but like on the TV copy, you could just see
the ends. I just watched the highlights of it, but
what is he doing? So this is going to be a fascinating game, but for Notre Dame, it's, I think, best that USC wins, and then Notre Dame gets that W against them next week. They're going to need that. They're going to need that kind of signature win over a name opponent. It's one thing to beat a ranked Duke team, a ranked Louisville team. You're going to need that kind of splashy win, and USC will give them that. But if USC is coming off of a loss to Arizona, it's kind of like, if you remember the 2017 season, Ryan, that was a really highly ranked USC team. They ended the year in the top 15. I think they ended up like 11th, won 11 games that year. But if you remember, they had just a couple weeks before lost to Washington State. And so it's just kind of like and they had barely beaten Utah the week before. They just, kind of took some of the luster off of that game. And, we all knew they were a good team, but it wasn't like, hey, they're undefeated. It's not, they're top 5. They're a team that people think are, a playoff team. They got the Heisman Trophy winner and all that kind of stuff. You want all the buzz and all the momentum being in that game. That's what you need if you're Notre Dame, in my opinion.
Yep.
So that's it. Any other interesting games, Ryan, on your docket? I think we kind of talked. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting games, but not a lot that are necessarily worth breaking down and diving into.
No, I just like that you mentioned the NC State Marshall game, because I just think that's a really interesting upset pick potentially this week. So.
I tell you, and Rasheem Ali is back. He was a guy that 2 years ago was really good. Last year that you had the kid from Florida State. He was there last year. And then I believe Ali was banged up last year as well.
He tore his ACL, I believe. I think he tore his ACL before the season started.
Yeah. So let's see, what was his game log last year? So he played, I think he only played like 2 or 3 games. He played against UConn in the postseason. So he came back in November, Ryan, against Georgia Southern, Georgia State, and UConn. So, but he was a good player. He was a 1,200 plus yard rusher. You and I talked a lot about him last summer. When we were trying to tell people that Marshall's going to be a lot better than people think. He was a big reason why, because you're like this, and he had to get a good offensive line. So this is a good football player. So I like this Marshall team. Obviously for Notre Dame, you don't want that to happen. You want NC State to get back on track. But from a college football standpoint, I kind of would like to see it, to be honest with you. And then maybe it's like we can say, hey, maybe Marshall's not as bad as you. I'm kidding. There was no excuse for that loss. I'm just messing around. But that's going to be an interesting game. Very interesting game. Looking at some of the others, Ryan, is Frank Harris going to play this year, or is he just going to kind of sit this one out? Just kind of,
Some guys maybe shouldn't have gone back to school, and Frank Harris may be one of them. But
or go somewhere else. Follow your receivers who left you that went somewhere else. Purdue at Iowa is one that I got my eye on, Ryan. That's one I got my eye on, because I could see there's a lot of upset people at Iowa right now, and I don't think a 26-16 win over a collapsing Michigan State team is going to call the dogs off. You know what I mean? And you got Wisconsin on the road coming up next week.
My buddy who bets said that he took Iowa -3.5, so for them to win by 4 points or more, and he said that he hates himself for it. But
it's down to 2.5 now. So looking at ESPN, it's down to 2.5 now. But Purdue's coming off of a really good win last weekend, Ryan, and not that Illinois is a great team. They're clearly not. But I
Yeah.
kind of felt like the offense had shown flashes at times during the season, and but just couldn't consistently get it going. And I thought last week they did. The biggest surprise for me last week is they actually ran the football. Like they ran it really well on Illinois last week. So Iowa's got a great offense, but if you're Purdue, you're like, dude, we may only need 17 points to get this thing done. You know, I mean,
I'm gonna clip what you just said because you accidentally said Iowa has a great offense. I'm gonna clip that. And put
oh
that
no.
on Twitter.
Did I say great offense?
Yeah.
Did I say great offense? No.
Yeah. I'm gonna
great
defense.
defense.
Put that. Yeah.
Iowa has a great defense. But their offense is just a hot mess, man. It's an absolute hot mess. And Cade McNamara is out for the year, and Ferentz had ruined him even before he got hurt. So
Petrus isn't starting, is he? I hope Petrus
No, I think he's gone, right? Isn't he?
I think he's still on the roster.
Is he really? Let me look that up. I thought he was out of eligibility. That'd be terrible. Oh, if that's true, man, I'd be putting money on.
I'm almost positive
Deacon Hill is who came off the bench. For them. Spencer Petrus is still on the roster, but he's not the guy that they have been playing at quarterback. And Deacon
regulated
Hill,
from 3-year starter to third stringer in one off season.
I mean, makes sense. He's terrible. But Deacon Hill came off the bench last week, Ryan, and went 11 of 27 for 115 yards, a touchdown, and a pick.
So it's not a quarterback problem, is what you're saying?
No. It's a coaching problem. At this point in time, but so it's going to be. I don't know. This could be the kind of big win that a young coach needs too. Like in all seriousness, like this is the kind of big early win that a young coach like Ryan Walters can get his team to really believe in them. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's going to be fascinating because I thought they played hard against Wisconsin. Wisconsin just had a better team, but they battled. I mean, Wisconsin pulled away, but I thought they competed at least. But man, this could get ugly for Iowa, which is sad because he's had such a great career. And I think was it you that talked about this recently, Ryan, where it's just kind of sad because he's had such a great career, Kirk Ferentz, but all he's going to be remembered by is what happened down the end with his son because he wouldn't fire his son. It's disappointing.
Even though he was a just backbone of a program for like 20 something years.
Forever. Just model of consistency in a lot of different ways. But anyway, Ryan, that's going to do it for this portion of the show, man. Why don't you go ahead and take us out of here?
Yep. So if anybody missed the first section of this podcast, we talked Notre Dame versus Louisville on coming up on Saturday. Another night game for Notre Dame, number 10 team in the country facing off against number 25. If you want to hear some of the keys to victory, make sure you go listen to that portion of the podcast. We also hit on some game predictions, some game balls, and then talked some other interesting college football games that are on the docket for this week. Before you leave, if you could please just hit that like button for us. Subscribe to the podcast. If you listen to us on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you get a notification every time that we have a podcast coming up or just kicking off. If you also go to at the bottom of the screen, boards.irishbreakdown.com, any latest team and recruiting intel and all the content we put out there, make sure to go check that out. And as always, folks, Notre Dame is only a little bit over 2 days away from Notre Dame kicking off against Louisville. Go Irish. We'll talk to you again very soon. This is Brian Driscoll. I'm Ryan Roberts here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.